I found the note taped to the stainless steel refrigerator door at eye level. Deal with this senile old man. That was the instruction my son-in-law Braden left for a maid who had already been fired. I was lying on the kitchen tiles, my body shutting down while they were flying first class to Hawaii using my life savings. They thought they had left a helpless retiree to rot in a locked house. They had no idea they had just declared war on the man who secretly owns the very resort they were heading to. Before I tell you how I turned their dream vacation into a living nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone exactly who you are. My name is Isaiah Bishop, and I am 70 years old. Most people look at me and see a slow-moving black man with gray hair and a cane. They see a retiree living on a fixed income, someone who spends his days watching television and napping. My own daughter Vanessa sees a burden. Her husband Braden sees a nuisance. They look at my trembling hands and assume I am weak. They do not know that these hands hold the patent for a hydraulic stabilization system used in 60% of the luxury yachts in the world. They do not know that the silence I keep is not senility, it is the discipline of a man who spent 40 years as an aerospace engineer listening to engines before they failed. But on that Tuesday morning, I nearly failed. I woke up on the kitchen floor. The cold of the ceramic tiles was seeping into my bones, but I was sweating. A cold, clammy sweat that coated my skin like oil. My vision was swimming, blurring at the edges with dark spots dancing in front of my eyes. I knew this feeling. It was the crash. My blood sugar had plummeted while I slept. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. My knees buckled and I hit the floor again, my cheeks smashing against the hard surface. I needed insulin, and I needed it 5 minutes ago. I dragged myself across the floor. My breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. I focused on the white cabinet under the sink where I kept my emergency kit. Inch by inch, I pulled my body forward, my fingernails scratching against the grout. The house was silent, deadly silent. Usually at this hour, I would hear the television blaring whatever reality show Braden was watching, or the sound of Vanessa blending her kale smoothies. But today, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own desperate breathing. I reached the cabinet. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the handle. I pulled it open. Empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my eyes. The plastic bin where I kept my insulin vials was there, but it was overturned. I pulled myself up, using the countertop, my muscles screaming in protest. I looked into the sink. There in the stainless steel basin were the shattered remains of 4 glass vials. The sharp medicinal smell of insulin wafted up, hitting me in the face. They were not just dropped. They were smashed. Someone had deliberately destroyed my supply. Panic began to rise in my chest, tight and suffocating. I turned my head, looking for the phone on the wall. It was gone. The cord had been ripped out of the jack, leaving a dangling wire that looked like a severed artery. I leaned against the counter, fighting the blackness that was threatening to swallow me. That was when I saw it. The yellow sticky note attached to the fridge. Deal with this senile old man. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive. Braden. I recognized the scrawl. He had written it as if I were a piece of broken furniture or a stain on the rug. But who was he writing to? Maria, our housekeeper, the kind woman who made me soup and checked my sugar levels when the family was ignoring me. Then I remembered. Yesterday afternoon I had heard shouting, Braden's voice booming through the living room. We do not need you anymore. We are cutting costs. Get out. He had fired her. He had fired the only person who would have found me. He wrote that note knowing she would never see it. Or maybe he wrote it for me to find. A final insult before the end. I slid down the cabinet until I was sitting on the floor again. My mind was racing even as my body was shutting down. Where were they? Why was the house so quiet? Then the memory hit me through the fog of hypoglycemia. Dinner 2 nights ago. Braden holding up his phone showing Vanessa pictures of a resort in Maui, the Royal Kahala. He kept talking about how much they deserved a break, how stressful it was living with an invalid. Vanessa had looked at me with guilt in her eyes, but she said nothing. She never said anything. They had gone. They had actually done it. They had packed their bags, taken my grandson Leo, and flown to Hawaii, leaving me alone in a locked house with no medicine and no phone. And they had taken my cards. I patted the pocket of my housecoat. My wallet was gone. My emergency cash stash in the cookie jar was gone. I let out a dry laugh that sounded more like a cough. They thought this was it. They thought the old engineer would just fade away on the kitchen floor, a victim of natural causes, a diabetic coma, a tragic accident. But Braden had made a miscalculation. He was a salesman. He dealt in surfaces, in appearances. He did not understand how things worked on the inside. He did not understand that a machine has backup systems. I am not a machine, but I built them, and I have backups. I focused on the pantry door across the kitchen. It seemed miles away. My vision was tunneling now, narrowing down to a pinhole of light. I had to move. If I passed out now, I would never wake up. I crawled. I dug my elbows into the floor using the army crawl I had learned 50 years ago in boot camp. 1, 2, 1, 2. I counted the tiles. I ignored the screaming in my muscles. I ignored the voice in my head that said, "Just close your eyes, Isaiah. It is easier." I reached the pantry. I pulled the door open. On the bottom shelf behind the dusty cans of lima beans that Braden refused to eat was a bag of white sugar. I ripped the bag open with my teeth. I didn't have the strength to find a spoon. I scooped a handful of the white granules into my mouth. It was dry, cloying, choking me. I swallowed it down dry, forcing it into my system. Then I grabbed a bottle of warm water from the floor and chugged it. I sat there amidst the spilled sugar, waiting. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Slowly, the shaking in my hands began to subside. The black spots in my vision began to fade, replaced by the sharp clarity of the morning sun streaming through the window. The cold sweat began to dry. I was alive. I wiped the sugar from my mouth with the sleeve of my robe. I looked at the sticky note again. Deal with this senile old man. Okay, Braden, you want to deal with me? Let us deal. I stood up. I was still weak, but I was steady. I walked out of the kitchen and down the hallway to my bedroom. The door was open. The room had been tossed. My drawers were pulled out, clothes scattered on the floor. They had been looking for something, probably the safe key. I walked to the closet and knelt down, pushing aside a pile of old shoeboxes. I pulled up a loose floorboard. Underneath, in a hollow space between the joists, sat a small metal box. I opened it. Inside lay a Nokia phone, a brick, an archaic piece of technology that Braden would have laughed at. But this phone had a battery life of 3 weeks, and it was on a secure satellite network. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up green. I dialed a number I had not used in 5 years. It rang twice. "Bishop?" The voice on the other end was gruff deep. Elijah. My college roommate. My former patent attorney, and the only man who knew exactly how many zeros were in my bank account. "I need you, Elijah," I said. My voice was raspy but strong. "Isaiah?" Elijah sounded worried. "It is 6 in the morning. What is wrong? You sound like you have been gargling gravel." "Protocol 0, I said. There was a silence on the line. Protocol 0 was a code we had established years ago. It meant, "My life is in danger and I am activating the nuclear option." "Where are you?" Elijah asked, his voice shifting instantly from sleepy friend to legal shark. "I am at the house," I said. "They left me, Elijah. They destroyed my insulin. They took my cards. And they are on a plane to Hawaii." "Who?" Elijah demanded, though he knew the answer. "Vanessa. And that husband of hers. They are going to the Royal Kahala." I heard the sound of a car engine starting on the other end of the line. Elijah was already moving. "The Royal Kahala?" Elijah let out a low, dark chuckle. "Isaiah, do they know?" "No," I said, looking at the note one last time. "They think they are staying at a 5-star resort. They do not know they are staying in my guest house." "I am 10 minutes away," Elijah said. "Do you need an ambulance?" I looked at the sugar spilled on the floor. I looked at the empty vials in the sink. I looked at the empty space where my family should have been. "No ambulance," I said. "Bring me insulin. Bring me a steak." "And Elijah?" "Yeah?" "Bring me the deed to the hotel." I hung up the phone. I walked back to the kitchen and ripped the sticky note off the fridge. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. They wanted to go on a vacation. I was going to make sure it was a trip they would never forget. I sat down in Braden's favorite recliner, the leather chair he never let me touch. I put my feet up on the coffee table. I waited. The senile old man was gone. The engineer was back online. And I was about to dismantle their lives piece by piece. I sat there on the cold kitchen tiles, surrounded by the crunch of spilled sugar crystals, waiting for the sound of salvation. The sugar was working. My hands had stopped, their violent trembling replaced by a dull ache that throbbed in time with my heartbeat. The darkness that had threatened to swallow me was receding, leaving behind a sharp, stinging clarity. The front door opened. It did not creak. The hinges were well oiled because I had oiled them myself 3 months ago. I heard heavy, hurried footsteps against the hardwood in the hallway. Isaiah. The voice was deep, rough like sandpaper over concrete. It was Elijah. "I am in the kitchen," I rasped. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, dry and brittle like dead leaves. Elijah rounded the corner. He was wearing a tracksuit and a coat thrown hastily over it, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting amidst the wreckage of the sugar bag and the water bottle. He looked at the sink, at the shattered glass of the insulin vials, and then back at me. His face, usually a mask of stoic legal professionalism, crumpled into pure rage. He did not ask what happened. He knew. He dropped the bag he was carrying and knelt beside me, pulling a fresh insulin pen from his pocket. He knew my dosage. He knew my routine. He had been my best friend for 40 years, since we were the only 2 black students in the engineering and law departments respectively. He grabbed my arm, his touch gentle but firm. He dialed the pen and pressed it against my skin. The click of the injection was the loudest sound in the room. I felt the cool liquid enter my system, a promise of life flowing back into my veins. "They left you," Elijah whispered. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. I nodded, pointing to the crumpled yellow note on the table. "Deal with this senile old man." Elijah read it aloud. His hand tightened around the paper, crushing it into a ball. "Deal with him." He looked at me, his eyes burning. "That is not a note, Isaiah. That is a death warrant." They smashed the vials. They cut the phone line. This is attempted murder. "Help me up," I said. I did not want to talk about murder. I wanted to see the extent of the damage. Elijah hoisted me up. I leaned on him for a moment, waiting for the room to stop spinning. I was 70 years old, and I felt every single minute of it. But as the medicine took hold, I felt something else waking up inside me. The engineer, the man who solved problems, the man who looked at a broken engine and did not cry, but fixed it. We walked slowly through the house. It was eerie. The silence was heavy, suffocating. It felt like a house where people had died, not a house where a family lived. The air was stale, smelling of neglect. We went to my bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and my heart sank. It looked like a tornado had touched down in the center of the room. My drawers were pulled out, dumping my socks and shirts onto the floor. The mattress was skewed, pushed halfway off the box spring. My books, my precious engineering journals, were scattered, their pages bent and torn. They were looking for something. Elijah said, stepping over a pile of sweaters. "They were looking for the key," I said, walking toward the closet. I pushed aside the hanging clothes, my suits, my old uniforms. The safe was bolted to the floor in the back corner. It was a heavy-duty steel box, fireproof and tamper-resistant. Or so I thought. The door of the safe was hanging open, swinging loosely on a bent hinge. The metal around the lock was twisted and scarred deep gouges, revealing the raw steel underneath. They hadn't used the key. They had used a crowbar. They had used brute force and violence against the only thing in this house that was truly mine. I knelt down, my knees popping. The safe was empty. Gone was the heavy envelope containing $15,000 in cash. It was my emergency fund money I had saved, dollar by dollar, from my pension intended for roof repairs or medical emergencies. Gone were the bearer bonds I had kept since the 90s. But I did not care about the paper. The paper could be replaced. The money was just numbers. My hand trembled as I reached into the dark void of the safe and felt around the back, trying to find the small velvet pouch. Nothing. It was gone. The air left my lungs in a rush. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "What is it, Isaiah?" Elijah asked, his voice low. "The necklace," I whispered. "The pearls I gave Sarah on our 30th anniversary, and her ring, the engagement ring, the one with the marquee cut diamond." Elijah cursed softly, a harsh word that hung in the air. They took Sarah jewelry, I said, my voice rising, cracking with the weight of the betrayal. They took her memory, Elijah. That ring. She was wearing it when she died. She made me promise to keep it safe. She said, give it to Vanessa when she finds a man who loves her properly. I stood up, clutching the doorframe for support. Vanessa had found a man who loved nothing but himself, and together they had pawned her mother memory to pay for a vacation. It was not a robbery, Elijah. It was an extraction. They took everything they thought had value. They stripped the carcass before they left it to rot. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the old brick Nokia I had retrieved from under the floorboards. It was a jarring sound in the dead silence. I pulled it out. The screen glowed with a text message. It was from Vanessa. I stared at the name. My daughter. The girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had taught to ride a bike, the girl who had sat by my bed when I had my hip surgery. I opened the message. Hey, Daddy. So sorry for the rush, but Braden and I have to go on a super urgent business trip to the West Coast. Big opportunity. We will be gone for a week. The fridge is stocked and Maria knows to check on you. Love you. Don't worry about us. I read it twice. 3 times. The lies were so blatant they were insulting a business trip. Braden had been unemployed for 8 months, and Vanessa worked part-time as a receptionist. The fridge was stocked. It was empty, save for expired milk and condiments. And Maria? Maria was fired yesterday. I felt a coldness settle over me. It was colder than the hypoglycemia. It was the absolute zero of a heart turning to stone. She lied to me. Elijah, I said, showing him the screen. She thinks I am stupid. She thinks I am just a senile old man who will believe anything she types. Elijah read the message, shaking his head. They are not on the West Coast. Isaiah, I tracked Braden credit card activity before I came over. The last ping was at the airport kiosk, checking in for a flight to Maui. First class, and 40 minutes ago his card was declined at a Hertz rental car counter in Honolulu, Maui, I said softly. The Royal Kahala. Elijah nodded. Your hotel, the one you bought through the shell company in 2005. I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the lie my daughter had sent me. Love you, she had typed. It was easy to type, harder to mean I raised the phone. I did not type a text response. My fingers were too big for the small buttons and I did not have the words. Instead, I opened the camera. I walked back to the kitchen. Elijah followed me. Silent, watchful, I smoothed out the crumpled yellow note on the table. Deal with this senile old man. I framed it in the viewfinder, the harsh yellow paper against the dark wood of the table, the cruel, jagged handwriting exposed for what it was. I snapped the picture. I attached it to the reply to Vanessa. No words, no questions, just the image of her husband command to let me die. I pressed send. I watched the progress bar. It moved slowly, agonizingly. Sent. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The house seemed to hold its breath. Then the phone buzzed again. A notification popped up. Message not delivered. I tried to call her number. It didn't ring. Went straight to a disconnect tone. A automated voice spoke, chirpy and mechanical. The customer you are calling is not available. She blocked me. I said, lowering the phone. She saw the picture. She realized I wasn't dead. She realized I found the note. And her response was not to call, not to apologize, not to send help. Her response was to cut the line. Elijah slammed his hand on the counter, making the dishes rattle. That is it. That is the line. Isaiah, we go to the police. We file charges. Elder. Abuse. Theft. Attempted manslaughter. I can have warrants issued by noon. I looked at him. I looked at the fury in his eyes, fury on my behalf. But then, I looked at the empty space where the insulin vials had been. I looked at the empty safe. I thought about the pearl necklace hanging around the neck of some pawn shop mannequin, or worse, packed in Patricia's suitcase. No police, Elijah, I said. My voice was steady now. The weakness was gone, replaced by the cold, hard hum of an engine revving up. Elijah frowned. What do you mean, no police? They tried to kill you. If we go to the police, Braden gets a lawyer, he gets bail. He spins a story about how I am confused. How I lost the money, how I broke the vials myself in a fit of dementia. He plays the victim, Vanessa cries. and maybe he gets a slap on the wrist. Maybe probation, and I get put in a state home for my own protection. I walked over to the window and looked out at the overgrown lawn. Braden had promised to mow weeks ago. I do not want justice, Elijah. I want ruin. I turned back to him. I want them to feel what I felt on this floor. I want them to feel helpless. I want them to reach for something they rely on and find it empty. I want to strip them of every layer of comfort until they are naked and shivering in the cold, just like they left me. Elijah studied my face. He saw the change. He saw that Isaiah Bishop, the retiree, was gone. And Isaiah Bishop, the man who built systems that could withstand hurricanes, was standing in his place. "What do you need?" Elijah asked. Softly, "I need access to the mainframe." I said, "I need you to reactivate my clearance level with the bank." "And Elijah, yeah, I need you to call the general manager at the Royal Kahala. Tell him the owner is checking in remotely, and tell him I have some very specific instructions regarding the guests in the presidential suite." Elijah smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile. "You are going to cancel their reservation?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. Canceling is too easy. Canceling is a mercy." I walked past him, picking up the insulin pen and putting it in my pocket. "I am not going to kick them out," I said. "I am going to keep them there, and I am going to make sure it is the most expensive educational experience of their lives." I looked at the blocked number on my phone screen one last time. "Goodbye, Vanessa," I whispered. "You wanted to deal with the senile old man? Deal accepted. Now let us see if you can survive the negotiation." To my son-in-law, Braden, and my daughter Vanessa, I was simply a man who smelled like old engine oil and cheap coffee. They looked at my calloused hands and saw a laborer. They looked at my garage filled with metal scraps and blueprints and saw a hoarder's nest. They assumed that my pension from the aerospace plant was barely enough to cover the electric bill and that the nice things in our house were results of their own imaginary success. They never asked what I actually did at the plant. They never asked why the CEO of the company sent me a Christmas card every year, handwritten. And they certainly never asked about the Bishop Hydro Stabilizer. I walked into my study, followed closely by Elijah. The room smelled of dust and the faint metallic tang of copper. It was the only room in the house Braden did not like to enter because it was boring. No flat-screen TVs, no leather recliners, just shelves of technical manuals and framed schematics. I walked over to the wall behind my drafting table and pulled down a large framed diagram. It was dated 1985. It detailed a hydraulic stabilization system designed to keep deep-sea vessels perfectly level even in rough waters. It was my design, my baby. They think I was just a mechanic. "Elijah," I said, running my finger over the blue ink lines. "They think I tightened bolts for 40 years. They do not know that every time a billionaire sips champagne on a mega yacht in the Mediterranean without spilling a drop, it is because of this patent right here." Elijah smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "It is a beautiful piece of engineering, Isaiah," he said. "But right now it is not the hydraulics that interest me. It is the royalties. The royalties. That was the secret that kept this family afloat for 2 decades. When I retired, I did not just take a pension. I retained a percentage of the licensing rights for the stabilizer. Every time a new luxury liner is built, every time a private yacht is commissioned, a check is deposited into a blind trust called the Bishop Foundation. Braden called me a senile old man, called me a burden, but he did not know that the Porsche he drove, the designer clothes Vanessa wore, and the private school tuition for my grandson Leo were all paid for by the grease monkey he despised." I sat down at my computer. My fingers were stiff, but they knew the keyboard well. I logged into the banking portal. The screen flickered to life, revealing a number that would have made Braden faint. I opened the tab labeled Joint Family Expense Account. This was the account I had set up 5 years ago, giving Vanessa access so she could buy groceries and pay utilities. I had set up an automatic transfer of $10,000 a month into it, a generous allowance intended to make their lives easier. I scrolled through the recent transactions. My jaw tightened. $400 at a steakhouse, $3,000 at a luxury handbag store, $200 at a spa. They were not buying groceries. They were bleeding me dry. "Look at this." "Elijah," I said, pointing at the screen. Look. Date. Yesterday. The day they left me on the floor, Elijah leaned in and read the entry, Royal Kahala Resort. Deposit, $5,000. They used my money to book the vacation to get away from me, I whispered. The irony is sickening. I looked at the transfer settings. The next scheduled deposit was set for tomorrow, the 1st of the month. Another $10,000 meant to hit their account just in time for their shopping spree in Hawaii. Elijah looked at me, his face serious. You know what to do. Isaiah, use the kill switch. I hovered the mouse cursor over the button labeled Suspend All Transfers. For years I had been afraid to press this button. I was afraid that if I cut off the money, they would cut off my access to Leo. I was afraid they would leave and take my grandson with them. I paid the price for peace. I bought their love, or at least their tolerance, with monthly installments. But looking at the empty safe in the closet and feeling the phantom pain of the missing insulin, I realized that I had not been buying love. I had been funding my own abuse. I am done paying for their silence. I said. I clicked the mouse. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to suspend this account? All associated cards will be declined immediately. I clicked yes. The screen flashed green, account frozen. I sat back in my chair, letting out a long breath. It felt like I had just released a heavy weight. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7 in the evening in New York, which meant it was 1 in the afternoon in Hawaii lunchtime. I closed my eyes and let my mind travel 4,000 miles across the ocean. I could see them perfectly. The Royal Kahala is a beautiful place, I know, because I stayed there 10 years ago when they installed my system on their private charter fleet. The restaurant, the Azure, sits right on the beach overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The tablecloths are crisp white linen, and the waiters wear white jackets. I imagined Braden sitting there wearing his aviator sunglasses indoors because he thinks it makes him look famous. He would be ordering the most expensive thing on the menu, not because he likes the taste, but because he likes the price tag. In my mind, I could see Patricia, my daughter, his mother-in-law, sitting across from him. She is a woman who wears too much gold and complains about everything. She would be complaining that the ocean is too loud or the sun is too bright. And Vanessa, she would be checking her phone, ignoring the view, waiting for a text from me that she had already blocked. I opened my eyes and looked at Elijah. It is done, I said. Now we wait. 4,000 miles away. The scene played out exactly as I had engineered it. Braden wiped a smear of butter from his chin. He had just finished a 2-pound lobster thermidor. Patricia had eaten a seafood tower that could have fed a family of 4. Vanessa was picking at a salad, sipping a $20 cocktail. This is the life, isn't it? Braden said, leaning back in his chair and patting his stomach. No whining, old man, no smell of medicine, just sun and class. We deserve this, babe, we really do. Patricia nodded vigorously, taking a sip of wine. You are so right, Braden. That house was becoming suffocating. It smells like old people and that father of yours, Vanessa. Honestly, he is just dead weight. You need to put him in a home when we get back. Use his pension checks to pay for it. Vanessa looked down at her plate. I do not know. He is my dad. He is a vegetable, Vanessa Braden snapped. He didn't even know who I was half the time. And did you see the kitchen? He is disgusting. It is a mercy, really. The waiter approached the table holding a small leather folder containing the bill. Braden snatched it up with a flourish. He didn't even look at the total. He just pulled out his Platinum Visa card, the one linked directly to the joint family expense account, and dropped it onto the tray. Put a 20% tip on there, Chief, Braden said, winking at the waiter. And keep the change. The waiter nodded professionally and walked away toward the terminal station. Braden turned back to the ocean, putting his hands behind his head. I am thinking we rent a convertible tomorrow, drive the coast. Maybe look at some real estate. Who knows? Maybe we move here. Patricia clapped her hands. Oh, Braden, that would be divine. I could have a guest cottage. 5 minutes passed. The waiter had not returned. Braden started tapping his foot, impatient. What is taking so long, he muttered. Service in this country is going downhill. Then the waiter appeared. He was not smiling anymore. He was walking briskly, and he was holding the leather folder with both hands close to his chest like a shield. He arrived at the table and leaned down, whispering discreetly so as not to disturb the other guests. Sir, I am afraid there is a problem with the card. Braden laughed a loud barking sound that made heads turn. A problem? You mean you swiped it wrong? It is a platinum card, buddy. It has no limit. Try it again. I did, sir. the waiter said, his voice remaining polite but firm. It was declined. Code 05. Do not honor. Patricia gasped, clutching her pearl necklace. Declined. That is impossible. Braden, tell him who you are. Braden's face turned a shade of red that matched the lobster shell. He snatched the card back. I am Braden Miller. I am a VIP guest at this hotel. There must be a glitch in your system. Here, try this one. He pulled out a second card, a MasterCard. This one was also linked to the joint account, Vanessa's secondary card. The waiter took it and walked back to the machine. Braden laughed nervously, looking around at the other diners. It is the salt air messes with the magnetic strips. You know how it is, technology. But inside his chest, his heart was beginning to hammer. The joint account had a balance of $15,000. He had checked it this morning. Why would it be declined? The waiter returned faster this time. He did not whisper. Declined again, sir. The bank has put a freeze on the account indicating suspicious activity. Suspicious activity. Braden stood up, knocking his chair back. That is my money. You people are incompetent. I want to speak to the manager? Sir, the manager will tell you the same thing, the waiter said, his patience wearing thin. The bill is $480. We need a valid form of payment immediately. Vanessa looked up, panic rising in her eyes. Braden, what is going on? Did Daddy... Shut up, Vanessa Braden hissed. He pulled out his phone. I am calling the bank. That old fool probably messed up the PIN number or something. He dialed the customer service number on the back of the card. He put it on speakerphone so everyone could hear him tear the representative apart. Welcome to First National Bank, the automated voice chirped. Please enter your account number. Braden punched in the numbers furiously. We are sorry, the voice said, cool and mechanical. This account has been frozen by the primary account holder, Mr. Isaiah Bishop. For security reasons, no transactions can be processed. Please contact the primary holder for authorization. The primary holder. The table went silent. Braden stared at the phone as if it had turned into a snake. Isaiah, the senile old man, the man who couldn't find his own glasses. He had frozen the account. But he is sick, Patricia stammered. He is supposed to be... Isn't he supposed to be in a coma or something? Vanessa's face went white. She remembered the picture I had sent, the picture of the note. She realized in that moment that I wasn't just awake. I was angry. He knows, Vanessa whispered. He knows we left him. He knows everything. Braden slammed the phone onto the table, shattering the screen. He looked at the waiter who was now signaling for security. This is a mistake, Braden shouted, beads of sweat popping out on his forehead. My father-in-law is mentally unstable. He pushed the wrong button. I have cash. He reached for his wallet. He opened it. It was empty. He had spent his last $100 on tips at the airport, expecting to hit the ATM as soon as he landed. I left my cash in the room. Braden lied, his voice cracking. The waiter signaled two large men in dark aloha shirts standing by the entrance. Sir, unless you can pay this bill, right now we will have to escort you to the security office, and we will be locking your suite until the balance is settled. Patricia let out a shriek. My luggage, my creams are in that room. Back in my dusty study in New York, I watched the computer screen. The bank alert popped up. Failed transaction, the Azure restaurant, amount $488. Reason? Account frozen by user. I leaned back in my chair and looked at Elijah. It begins, I said softly. Elijah nodded, checking his watch. Phase 1 is complete, he said. They are stranded, broke and humiliated. Now what? Now, I said, picking up a blueprint of the house Braden wanted to sell. Now we secure the perimeter. Braden thinks this house is his asset. He thinks he can sell it out from under me, but he is about to find out that he is living inside a machine he doesn't understand. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in years. The sugar was fully metabolized, fueling my brain, fueling my rage. He called me senile, I said, walking to the window looking out at the driveway where Braden prized Porsche sat gathering dust. I am going to show him exactly how sharp my mind really is. Elijah, call the towing company. Tell them there is an abandoned vehicle in my driveway and tell them to bring the heavy-duty truck. I smiled a cold, dangerous smile. I think it is time we did some cleaning up around here. 7 days is a long time to wait for a trap to spring, but I have always been a patient man. In engineering, you learn that the stress point of a material does not reveal itself immediately. You have to apply pressure and wait for the cracks to form. For 1 week, I lived in that silent house enjoying a peace I had not known in years. Elijah had sent a cleaning crew, a team of discreet professionals who scrubbed the floors, sanitized the kitchen, and removed every trace of the neglect my children had inflicted upon me. They even polished the silver. The house smelled of lemon and beeswax, not the stale odor of decay Braden had complained about. I spent those days preparing. I rehearsed my movements. I practiced the vacant stare, the slight tremor in the hand, the way a confused old man might shuffle his feet instead of lifting them. I looked in the mirror and stripped the intelligence from my eyes, replacing it with a watery, clouded gaze. It was the hardest thing I have ever built, this mask of incompetence, but I built it with the same precision. I used it to design hydraulic valves. On Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after they had left me to die on the kitchen floor, they returned. I was sitting in the living room watching a game show with the volume turned up a little too high. I was wearing a clean cardigan and my slippers, enjoying a cup of tea. The house was immaculate. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I heard the car pull up. It was not a limousine. It was not even an Uber Black. It sounded like a rattling city taxi telling me that their journey home from the airport had been as humiliating as their stay at the hotel. The front door flew open, banging against the wall. There was no "Hello, Daddy." There was no "I missed you." There was only the heavy breathing of 3 people who were exhausted, broke, and furious. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on the television screen where a woman was spinning a giant wheel. "Is he dead?" Braden, voice cracked. It was rough horse likely. Horse. From screaming at bank tellers and hotel managers for the last 48 hours, I do not know, Patricia voice answered, sharp and shrewish. "It smells clean in here. Too clean. Maybe the county came and took the body." "Oh God, stop it," Vanessa sobbed. Her voice was thin, trembling. "Please do not say that I heard their footsteps approaching, cautious and slow, as if they were entering a tomb. They walked into the living room and stopped dead." I turned my head slowly, mimicking the movement of a rusted hinge. I looked at them blankly, blinking twice. They looked like they had been through a war. Braden, usually so polished with his gelled hair and pressed shirts, looked like a castaway. His expensive linen shirt was wrinkled and stained with sweat. His face was peeling from a sunburn he probably couldn't afford. Aloe vera for, Patricia was missing an earring and her designer luggage looked scuffed. Vanessa looked terrified, her eyes swollen, red circles of guilt dark against her skin. They stared at me. They stared at the clean room. They stared at the fresh tea on the table. "You are alive," Braden whispered. It was not relief. It was disappointment, pure and simple. I smiled, a lopsided, foolish smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Vanessa," I said, my voice pitched high and wavering. "You are back from the store. Did you get the milk? The cat is hungry." Vanessa covered her mouth, a sob escaping her throat. "Daddy, you are okay." Braden marched forward, his shock quickly replaced by the white-hot rage of a man who has been humiliated. He grabbed the remote and turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence. "Cut the act, old man," Braden shouted, leaning down into my face. He smelled of stale airplane air and cheap whiskey. "Why did you do it? Why did you freeze the accounts? We were stranded. We had to beg. We had to sleep in the airport lobby for 2 nights because the hotel locked us out. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know how embarrassed I was?" I shrank back into the chair, making myself small. I looked at his angry red face and I feigned total confusion. "Accounts," I mumbled, picking at a loose thread on my sweater. I do not know about accounts, Braden." I just pressed the button. "What button?" Braden screamed, shaking the chair. "What button?" "Isaiah." "The red one," I said, innocently looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. "The computer machine. It had a red button. It said stop. I thought it was a game. The numbers were moving too fast. I wanted them to stop." Braden straightened up, looking at me with disbelief. He looked at Patricia, then at Vanessa. He thinks it was a game. Braden ran a hand through his messy hair. He thinks online banking is a video game. Jesus Christ. He froze our assets because he liked the pretty colors. Patricia threw her handbag onto the sofa, stirring up a cloud of dust that wasn't there since the cleaners had done such a good job. You mean to tell me, Patricia shrieked, that we spent 3 days eating vending machine crackers and sleeping on airport benches because this senile old bat got confused playing with the computer? I told you, Braden. I told you he was dangerous. He should be in a home. He is a liability. Vanessa stepped forward timidly. Daddy, what about the note? The picture you sent? You sent us a picture of the note Braden left. This was the critical moment, the moment where the lie would either hold or shatter. I looked at Vanessa knowing she was the weak link, knowing she had a conscience somewhere buried under her husband ambition. Note, I asked, tilting my head, mimicking the innocent curiosity of a child. What note, sweetie? I didn't send pictures. I lost my phone. The black brick phone. I put it in the soup. It was cold. I pointed to the kitchen. I made soup. But the phone tasted bad. Braden let out a short, harsh laugh. It was a sound of pure relief mingled with contempt. He put the phone in the soup, Braden said, turning to Vanessa. See, he is gone, babe. His brain is mush. He probably took a picture by accident while he was trying to figure out how to eat it. He does not remember the note. He does not remember anything. He is just empty. He leaned down, looking at me closely, examining my face for any sign of the man I used to be. I held his gaze, letting my jaw hang slack, letting a little bit of drool gather at the corner of my mouth. It was humiliating, but it was necessary. See, Braden sneered, poking my shoulder hard. He is nobody, just a shell. I watched the tension leave his body. He believed it. He wanted to believe it so badly, because the alternative, that I was a mastermind punishing him, was too terrifying for his small mind to comprehend. He needed me to be the senile old man, because if I was senile, he was still the victim. He was still the hero of his own story, just temporarily inconvenienced by an idiot. Patricia walked over to the kitchen, inspecting the counters. Well, someone cleaned up. Patricia sniffed. Maybe he hired a maid before he lost his mind completely, or maybe he just scrubbed the floors in a fugue state. Who cares? The important thing is, he is incompetent. Braden nodded a plan forming behind his greedy eyes. He walked over to Patricia and grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the hallway. They thought I couldn't hear them. They thought the TV volume was up because I was deaf, not because I was bored, but my hearing was perfect, honed by years of listening to the hum of hydraulic pumps seeking out the slightest irregularity. I leaned my head back against the chair, closing my eyes, pretending to nap, but I focused every ounce of my attention on their whispers. We got lucky, Mom. Braden whispered, his voice low and urgent. Intense luck. Seriously, I thought we were dead when the card stopped. I thought he figured it out. But look at him. He is drooling. He is worse than before. The hypoglycemia probably fried whatever brain cells he had left. We have to move fast, Braden, Patricia hissed back. We cannot risk another incident like this. Hawaii was a disaster, but it was a wake-up call. We need liquidity. We need his money under our control immediately. I know, Braden replied. I am going to call the lawyer tomorrow. We push the narrative that he is a danger to himself. The soup story. The freezing the accounts. It is perfect evidence of incapacity. We get the power of attorney and then we sell the house Patricia finished for him. We sell this dusty mausoleum and put him in that state facility off the highway, the one with the cheap rates, and we take the equity. We can buy that condo in the city, the one near the club. And the land, Braden added, his voice dropping even lower. The plot in the county, the one with the old shed. I found the deed in his office. He thinks it is worthless scrubland. But I have a developer friend who says the zoning is about to change. We can flip it for $200,000. Easy. $200,000. They were getting excited about $200,000, selling my land, selling my legacy, unaware that the land sat on top of a mineral deposit worth millions. Unaware that they were discussing their heist in front of the bank manager. We have to be nice to him, Braden said. Nice for a few days, just until he signs the papers. Feed him soup. Let him watch his shows. Do not spook him. Agreed, Patricia said. Let us get Vanessa on board. She is soft. She feels bad about leaving him. I opened one eye, just a crack. Vanessa was standing by the window looking out at the garden. She looked wretched. She wasn't plotting with them. She was just existing trapped in their orbit. But she didn't come to check on me. She didn't check my sugar. She stood there paralyzed by her own weakness. Braden walked back into the living room, clapping his hands, a fake smile plastered on his peeling face. All right, Pops, Braden announced, his voice loud and patronizing like he was talking to a toddler. We are back and everything is fine. You just relax. Okay, we are going to take care of everything. Vanessa, make your dad some dinner. He looks hungry. Vanessa started toward the kitchen. I closed my eyes again, letting out a soft snoring sound. They relaxed. I could feel the atmosphere in the room shift from panic to predatory calculation. They went upstairs to unpack, to wash the smell of the airport off their skin, to count the money they thought they were about to make. I sat, alone in the living room, listening to their footsteps overhead. You think you are lucky, Braden? I thought, the rage burning cold and steady in my chest. You think the old man forgot. I forgot nothing. I remembered the cold tiles of the kitchen floor. I remembered the taste of the dry sugar. I remembered the empty safe. And I certainly remembered the note, sell the house, put me in a state facility, flip the land. I tightened my grip on the armrest of the chair. Go ahead, Braden. Accelerate the plan. Run toward the cliff edge as fast as you can. I will be right here holding the rope. They wanted to play house. They wanted to play Dr. Fine. But they forgot that this house was built by an engineer, and engineers always knowing where the structural weaknesses are. I waited until I heard the water running in the shower upstairs. Then I reached into the cushion of the chair and pulled out a small black object, a voice recorder. I had slipped it there when I heard their taxi pull up. I pressed stop, had their confession, I had their plan. I slipped the recorder into my pocket and settled back into my role. The senile old man was ready for Act 2, and this time the stage was rigged to collapse. The invasion of my home did not happen with tanks or soldiers, but with Louis Vuitton suitcases and a cloud of suffocating perfume. Patricia did not just visit, she occupied. She moved into the guest room down the hall, the one that used to be my study, before Vanessa claimed it for a nursery that never materialized. Within 2 hours, my bathroom smelled of harsh chemicals and my living room was cluttered with her shopping bags filled with things she had bought on credit cards that were about to bounce. But the real assault happened at the dinner table. For 40 years, I have found peace in cooking. It is engineering with edible materials, chemistry that feeds the soul. That evening, I decided to make a peace offering. I spent 3 hours in the kitchen preparing the meal my mother used to make for me in Georgia: slow-braised oxtails, collard greens with smoked turkey, and hot water cornbread. It was food that told a story, food that held the history of my family in every bite. The aroma filled the house, rich and savory, a scent that usually made a house feel like a home. At 6 o'clock, they gathered at the table. Braden looked impatient, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Patricia swept in wearing a silk caftan that she probably thought made her look regal, but only made her look like a draped sofa. Vanessa sat down, keeping her eyes on her placemat, avoiding my gaze. I brought the heavy ceramic pot to the table, setting it down on the trivet with a smile that I forced onto my face, pushing past the pain in my stiff joints. Dinner is ready, I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. I made the greens, Vanessa. You used to love the greens. Vanessa looked up, a flicker of nostalgia in her eyes. Oh, Daddy, that smells really... She didn't finish the sentence because Patricia let out a sound that was half gasp, half retch. Oh my God! Patricia waved her hand in front of her nose as if she were wafting away toxic fumes. What is that smell? Isaiah, it is heavy. It is greasy. It is dinner, I said, spooning a generous portion onto a plate. It is good for the blood. Patricia pushed her plate away, the china screeching against the table. I cannot eat this, Isaiah. My doctor has me on a very strict diet. This is, well, let us call it what it is. This is slave food, isn't it? It is the kind of thing people eat when they cannot afford real cuts of meat. It is peasant food, purely cholesterol and heart attacks on a plate. I am surprised you are not dead yet, eating this slop. The room went silent. The insult hung in the air, gross and heavy. Slave food. She looked at the meal that had sustained generations of my ancestors, the meal that represented survival and community, and she reduced it to a racial slur wrapped in a dietary critique. Braden laughed a short, nervous bark. Yeah, Pops, honestly, it is a bit much. Mom is used to lighter fare, salads, grilled salmon. This is pretty heavy stuff. I stood there holding the serving spoon, feeling the heat rise in my chest. It was not just anger, it was a deep, sorrowful pity for their ignorance. I thought you were hungry, I stammered, letting my hand shake so the spoon rattled against the pot. It is good meat, soft, very soft. Patricia rolled her eyes, picking up her phone. I am ordering sushi. Braden, give me your phone. Mine is charging. I cannot put this grease in my body. Vanessa looked at me, then at the oxtails. She looked hungry. She looked like she wanted to eat it, but the fear of her mother-in-law was stronger than her appetite. I will just have a salad too, she whispered. I am sorry, Daddy. I slowly sat down. I pulled my plate closer. I did not order sushi. I did not apologize. I ate. I ate the food my mother taught me to cook, and I enjoyed every bite, letting the flavor remind me of who I was and who they were not. They sat there waiting for their delivery, looking at me with disgust, thinking they were superior. In reality, they were starving their souls while I fed mine. The real performance, however, came after the plates were cleared. Braden cleared his throat, standing up and clapping his hands together like a coach rallying a losing team. All right, family meeting time, he announced, looking at me with a predatory glint in his eyes. Pops, why don't you stay right there? We have some paperwork to go over. Paperwork, I asked, blinking confusedly. I do not have my glasses, Braden. The letters are small like ants. You do not need glasses for this, Pops, Braden said, his voice dripping with fake concern. He pulled a thick stack of documents from his briefcase, placing them on the table with a heavy thud. This is for your health, Braden explained, leaning over me, smelling of mints and desperation. Since you had that incident last week with the sugar, we realized we need to get you better medical coverage, better doctors, better medicine. But the insurance company, they are strict. They need someone to be authorized to talk to them on your behalf. So Vanessa and I can handle the billing, Patricia chimed in, inspecting her fingernails. It is for your own good, Isaiah. You almost died. You clearly cannot manage your own appointments anymore. Braden is just trying to save your life. I looked at the document lying on top. Braden had been careful. He had clipped a paper over the top half, hiding the title. But he had made a mistake. He underestimated the peripheral vision of an engineer who used to inspect turbine blades for microscopic cracks. As he flipped the page to the signature line, I caught a glimpse of the header text upside down. It did not say medical authorization form. It said general durable power of attorney with real estate provisions. He wasn't trying to get me a doctor. He was trying to get the right to sell my house, my land, and everything I owned. He wanted to liquidate my life to pay for his mistakes. I do not like signing things, I mumbled, pulling my hand back, acting afraid. My hand shakes. The pen slips. Braden's sigh was sharp, aggressive. Come on, Pops. Do not be difficult. It is just a formality. Look, Vanessa is signing as a witness. He pushed the paper toward Vanessa. Sign it, babe. Show him it is safe. Vanessa took the pen. Her hand trembled. She knew this wasn't just about insurance. She knew Braden had been on the phone with a realtor all morning talking about quick sales and cash offers. She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. Just sign it, Daddy, she whispered, her voice breaking. It will make things easier. Please, easier for whom I wondered. For you? Or for the vultures circling your marriage? I looked at Vanessa, hoping she would stop this, hoping she would find a spine somewhere in that designer dress. But she signed. She scribbled her name and pushed the paper back to Braden. See. Braden grinned. Easy. Now you, Pops. Right here on the X. He thrust the pen into my hand. It was a heavy, expensive pen, likely bought with my money. I held it loosely, letting it wobble. I looked at the paper. The lines were blurring. Not because I couldn't see, but because I was calculating the trajectory of this missile I was about to launch. If I refused, they would just declare me incompetent. They would drag me to court. They would bring in doctors like Dr. Thorne. They would force the issue. But if I signed, If I signed a legal document with a name that was not my own, the document would be void. It would be a worthless piece of paper, but they wouldn't know that. Not until they tried to use it. And by then, it would be too late. I looked at Braden. He was practically vibrating with greed. He was already spending the commission from the house sale in his head. "Okay," I whispered. "I sign. For the doctor." "Good," Braden said. "Good man. Just right there." I lowered the pen to the paper. I let my hand shake violently, creating jagged, indecipherable strokes. I started to write. I did not write. Isaiah Bishop. I thought about the only living creature that had ever shown me unconditional loyalty in this house. My old golden retriever who had passed away 3 years ago. The dog. Braden had kicked once when he thought I wasn't looking. I wrote Barnaby. I made the letters messy, sprawling, and illegible to the untrained eye. The B looked like a scribble, the Y trailed off into a line. But it was definitely not Isaiah. I lifted the pen. "There," I said, letting out a long, exhausted breath. "Done." Braden snatched the paper away instantly. He didn't even look at the signature. He just saw ink on the line. He saw the victory. "Yes," he hissed, pumping his fist. "Finally. Okay, that is it. We are good." Patricia clapped her hands, delightful. "Now we can finally move forward." Braden. "Call that man first thing in the morning." I sat there watching them celebrate. Braden was hugging Vanessa, who looked like she wanted to vomit. Patricia was already pouring herself a glass of my best wine. They thought they had just captured the king. They didn't realize they had just been checkmated by a dead dog. I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane. "I am tired," I said. "I go to bed now." Yeah, go to bed, Pops," Braden said, waving me away, dismissing me like a servant. "You earned it." I walked down the hallway, the taste of the oxtails still warm in my mouth, leaving them to their sushi and their schemes. I went into my room and locked the door. I walked over to the nightstand, where a framed photo of Barnaby sat. The dog had a goofy grin, his tongue lolling out. "Good boy, Barnaby," I whispered, touching the glass. "Good boy." They had a piece of paper signed by a dog. And tomorrow, when they tried to use that paper to sell my home, the only thing they would be catching was a lawsuit for fraud. I lay down on my bed, listening to the murmur of their voices, plotting downstairs. They were dividing up the spoils of a war they had already lost. "Sleep well, Braden," I thought, closing my eyes. Because when you wake up, you are going to find out that the slave food gave me a lot more energy than your sushi gave you. The sound of metal screeching against concrete is a specific kind of agony for an engineer. It sounds like a scream, like a structural failure, like something beautiful being destroyed by something brute and thoughtless. That was the sound I woke up to on Wednesday morning. The sun was barely up, but Braden was already at work dismantling my life. Walked to the window of the living room, clutching my robe tight around my chest. The driveway was occupied by a car that did not belong there. A Porsche 911, sleek, black, and aggressive. It was a rental, of course. Braden credit was shot, and his bank accounts were frozen by my hand. But he had evidently found a way to lease this monstrosity, probably using a predatory loan shark. Or perhaps he had sold Vanessa a wedding dress I did not know and I did not care. What I cared about was what he was doing to make room for it. He was in my garage. My garage was not just a place to park cars. It was a laboratory. It was a sanctuary where I had spent nights and weekends for 40 years building, refining, and dreaming. The shelves were lined with prototypes, hand-carved wooden wind tunnel models of wing struts and scale replicas of hydraulic landing gear systems. They were not toys. They were the physical history of my career, the tangible proof of the patents that had made me a wealthy man, and Braden was throwing them onto the driveway like they were garbage. I watched him drag a large aluminum model of a fuselage out the door. It scraped against the pavement, creating sparks. He kicked it aside, wiping his hands on his designer jeans, then went back in for more. I shuffled to the front door, opening it slowly, putting on my mask of confusion. My hands trembled by my side as I stepped out onto the porch. "Braden." I called out, my voice thin and wavering. "What are you doing with the planes? The little planes are sleeping." Braden spun around. He was sweating. his face flushed with exertion and annoyance. He pointed a gloved hand at the pile of metal and wood at his feet. "I'm clearing out this junk." "Pops," he shouted, "I need the garage space. The Porsche cannot stay on the street. It is a high-performance vehicle. It needs protection from the elements." Protection. He wanted to protect a rented car by destroying the prototypes that had revolutionized deep-sea stabilization. I shuffled down the steps, acting as if I were afraid of the sunlight. But those are mine," I whimpered. "I made them. The wind likes them." Braden laughed, kicking a wooden propeller, snapping it in half. "The wind likes them. Listen to yourself. You are talking nonsense. This is trash. Isaiah, it is hoarding. Look at this dusty old junk. It is a fire hazard. I am doing you a favor, cleaning this out." He grabbed a box labeled Project Gemini 1985 and dumped it upside down. Brass fittings and precision-tooled gears spilled onto the asphalt, rolling into the gutter. I felt a physical pain in my chest watching my work treated like refuse, but I could not stop him. I could not run down there and tackle him. I had to be the senile old man. I had to be the victim. "Please," I whispered, clutching the railing. "Do not throw them away. I need them to fly to the moon." Braden rolled his eyes, ignoring me completely. He grabbed a broom and started sweeping the debris toward the street, preparing to load it all into a dumpster he had rented. Then a car turned the corner. It was not a neighbor. It was not a delivery truck. It was a Lincoln Town car, black and polished to a mirror shine. It moved silently, gliding down the street like a shark in dark water. It slowed down as it approached my house and then pulled to a smooth stop right in front of the driveway, blocking Braden's path to the dumpster. Braden stopped sweeping, leaning on the broom handle, looking annoyed. Who is this now? Probably some code inspector. The rear door of the Lincoln opened. A man stepped out. He was Japanese, impeccable in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than Braden's entire life. His hair was silver, combed back perfectly, and he wore rimless glasses that glinted in the morning sun. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with an air of quiet, absolute authority. This was Kenji to the world. Kenji was a private equity consultant. To Braden, he was a stranger. But to me, Kenji was the man who had managed the Bishop Foundation for 15 years. He was my right hand, my confidant, and the only person besides Elijah who knew where the bodies were buried. And today, he was playing the role of a lifetime. Kenji walked up the driveway, ignoring Braden's hostile stare. He stopped in front of the pile of junk, specifically looking at the aluminum fuselage Braden had just scratched. "Excuse me," Kenji said, his voice heavily accented but precise. "Is this an original Bishop prototype?" Braden blinked, confused. He looked at the trash, then at Kenji. "What?" Braden asked. "It is just scrap metal, buddy. I am clearing out the old man hoard." Kenji crouched down. He didn't touch the metal with his bare hands. He pulled a white cotton glove from his pocket, put it on, and gently traced the curve of the wing design. He acted as if he were touching a religious artifact. "Scrap," Kenji whispered, standing up and looking at Braden with shock. "This is not scrap. This is a mid-80s fluid dynamic model, hand-tooled. I have been looking for pieces like this for collectors in Tokyo for years." Braden's grip on the broom loosened. Collectors. Tokyo. The words triggered something in his lizard brain. The greed, the desperation. Collectors. Braden asked, his voice changing instantly from aggressive to oily. "You mean people pay money for this stuff?" Kenji adjusted his glasses, looking at the pile with hungry eyes. "There is a niche market for vintage aerospace engineering memorabilia," Kenji said coolly, "especially from the Bishop era. The primitive nature of the designs. It is considered art, industrial art." He looked at Braden. "Are you the owner of this collection?" Braden didn't even hesitate. He didn't look at me standing on the porch. He didn't think about the fact that he had just called it trash 30 seconds ago. "Yes," Braden lied, straightening his shirt. "I am Braden Miller. I manage the estate. My father-in-law passed these down to me." He gestured vaguely toward me, dismissing my presence completely. Kenji nodded solemnly, glancing at me, briefly, holding back a wink. "I see," Kenji said. "Well, Mr. Miller, I am prepared to make an offer. I am on a tight schedule flying back to Kyoto tonight. I cannot leave these pieces here exposed to the weather. It would be a crime against history." Braden's eyes lit up. He dropped the broom. "How much are we talking here? I mean, I was planning on..." curating them, but for the right price. Kenji looked at the pile again, doing a quick mental calculation. For the entire lot, Kenji said. As is right now, cash transaction. Braden nodded eagerly, swallowing hard. Cash is good. Cash works. $50,000, Kenji said. The world stopped. I saw Braden's knees buckle slightly. $50,000. It was enough to pay off the loan shark he had borrowed the $20,000 from. It was enough to pay the rent on the Porsche for a year. It was enough to buy his way back into the illusion of wealth he so desperately craved. 50,000. Braden repeated, his voice squeaking slightly. For this. For the art. Kenji corrected him. Braden looked at me. He looked at the senile old man on the porch who was mumbling about the moon. He knew the planes were mine. He knew he had no right to sell them. He knew he was stealing, but the greed was stronger than the fear. Deal, Braden shouted. Deal, absolutely. You can take it all. I will even help you load it. Kenji nodded. He placed his briefcase on the hood of the Porsche, using Braden Precious Rental as a table. He opened the case. Inside were stacks of $100 bills wrapped in bank bands. It was a beautiful sight. I have the funds with me, Kenji said. I prefer to settle acquisitions immediately. Braden was practically drooling. He reached for the money, but Kenji closed the case, snapping it shut. A receipt first, Kenji said, pulling a document from his pocket. Just a standard bill of sale, transferring ownership from you to my client, certifying that you are the lawful owner and have the right to sell. Braden snatched the pen. I own it, he said, signing his name with a flourish. Braden Miller. There it is, yours. Kenji took the paper. He checked the signature. Then he handed the briefcase to Braden. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Miller, Kenji said. Braden grabbed the case, clutching it to his chest like a life preserver. He didn't help Kenji load the cars. He didn't help him carry the heavy aluminum pieces. He just stood there hugging the money, watching as his driver and Kenji carefully placed my life work into the trunk of the Lincoln. I stood on the porch watching the transaction. Braden looked up at me. He grinned, a nasty, triumphant grin. He held up the briefcase. Look at that, Pops, he shouted. You were right. The planes are going to fly after all. Just not with you. He turned and ran into the house, rushing to hide the money before Vanessa or Patricia could ask for a share. He didn't care about the models. He didn't care about history. He just cared about the green paper in his hands. Kenji finished loading the last box. He stopped, by the porch, wiping a smudge of dirt from his suit. He looked up at me. His expression changed. The deference vanished, replaced by the sharp look of a co-conspirator. He tapped his breast pocket where the bill of sale was secured. Got him, Kenji mouthed. I nodded slowly, touching the brim of my imaginary hat. Kenji got into the Lincoln and drove away, taking my prototypes back to the secure storage facility where they belonged. I turned and walked back into the house. Braden was in the kitchen, dumping the cash onto the table, counting it with frantic, shaking hands. 50,000, he whispered, kissing a stack of bills. We are back, baby. We are back. He didn't know. He didn't know that the $50,000 in that briefcase was my money. It was withdrawn from my personal investment account yesterday morning, given to Kenji for this exact purpose. He didn't know that by signing that bill of sale claiming ownership of goods that were not his, he had just committed grand larceny, and by accepting cash for stolen goods, he was now guilty of trafficking in stolen property. And he certainly didn't know that the briefcase contained a hidden GPS tracker, and the serial numbers of every single bill had been recorded by Elijah and filed with a private investigator. Braden wasn't rich. He was just holding the evidence of his own crime. I shuffled past the kitchen, looking at him counting my money. Did the nice man take the toys? I asked, my voice trembling. Braden laughed, stuffing a bundle of cash into his pocket. Yeah, Pops, Braden said. The nice man took the trash. You should thank me. I just cleaned up your mess. I smiled. Thank you, Braden, I whispered. Thank you for being so predictable. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I pulled out my notebook and made a mark under the column labeled Crimes, Theft of Insulin, check. Elder Abuse, check. Grand Larceny, check. The list was growing, and the trap was tightening. I heard Braden whooping with joy downstairs, popping a bottle of champagne. He was celebrating his windfall. He didn't realize that the $50,000 wasn't a lifeline. It was the rope he would use to hang himself. And I, the senile old man, was the one who had just kicked the chair out from under him. The golf bag weighed 40 pounds, but the humiliation weighed a ton. It dug into my shoulder, cutting off the circulation to my arm, but I did not complain. I adjusted the strap and kept my head down, shuffling behind them like a mule. Braden was walking 10 feet ahead of me, swinging a driver he had just bought from the pro shop with my money, wearing a polo shirt that was too tight across his stomach and white cleats that had never seen a speck of dirt. He looked ridiculous, a caricature of wealth. But in his mind, he was the king of the world. And why wouldn't he be? He had $50,000 of cash in his pocket, the money he got from selling my life, work, to my own assistant. We were at the Pines, the most exclusive country club in the state. It was a place where membership cost more than Braden made in 3 years. A place of manicured greens, hushed voices, and old money. Braden had bought a day pass using the cash, flashing it around like he owned the place. He wanted to show off. He wanted Patricia and Vanessa to see him in his element. Patricia was riding in the golf cart, applying another layer of sunscreen, complaining about the humidity. Vanessa sat next to her, looking miserable, holding a bottle of water. Her eyes darted back to me every few minutes, checking to see if I had collapsed yet. But she didn't offer to carry the bag. She didn't offer me a ride. She just watched. "Hurry up, Pops!" Braden shouted over his shoulder, swinging the club through the air, slicing the wind. "Keep up. We have a tea time, and I do not want to be late because you are dragging your feet." I trudged forward, breathing rhythmically. I was 70 years old, and my knees ached with every step on the uneven grass. But I had walked further than this, carrying heavier loads than this in conditions Braden would cry in. I focused on the ground, counting the steps. 1, 2, 1, 2. We reached the first tee. Braden friends were waiting for him. They were 2 men named Todd and Rick, copies of Braden in different shades of pastel. They worked in real estate or finance or some other industry where they moved money around without actually creating anything. They held beers in their hands at 10 in the morning and laughed loud, braying laughs that disturbed the peace of the morning. "Look who made it," Todd shouted, slapping Braden on the back. The man with the golden touch. "I heard you closed a big deal yesterday. Sold some vintage art or something." Braden grinned, puffing out his chest. "Yeah, you know how it is." Todd, just clearing out the estate, found some rare pieces. Buyers were lining up. "Easy money, boys, easy money." He glanced at me, expecting me to react to hear him call my prototypes. Easy money. But I stood still, staring at a tree, acting as if I were listening to the birds. "Who is?" the caddy Rick asked, pointing his beer bottle at me. Is that your father-in-law?" Braden laughed, leaning on his driver. "Yeah, that is Isaiah. He gets confused if I leave him at home, wanders off, you know. So I brought him along to make himself useful. Cheaper than hiring a club caddy, right? Plus the exercise is good for his heart." Rick looked at me with a sneer, looking me up and down, taking in my old trousers and the sweat on my forehead. "Does he even know what he is doing?" Rick asked loudly, talking about me like I was a piece of equipment. "Does he know the difference between a 9-iron and a wood? Or is he going to hand you a putter for the drive?" The 3 of them burst into laughter. Patricia joined in from the cart, a high-pitched giggle that grated on my nerves. "Oh, he doesn't know anything," Patricia chirped. "He is just a pack mule today. Darling, just point at what you want and he will fetch it, hopefully." Braden stepped up to the tee. He placed his ball carefully. He did a few practice swings, trying to look professional, but I watched his stance. His feet were too close together. His grip was too tight. He was trying to muscle the ball instead of flowing with it. "Give me the driver, Pops," Braden snapped, snapping his fingers at me. I pulled the driver from the bag. It was a top-of-the-line titanium club. I handed it to him, avoiding eye contact. Braden lined up his shot. He swung hard, grunting with the effort. Thwack! The ball sliced hard to the right, soaring into the rough, disappearing into a cluster of trees. It was a terrible shot, amateurish and weak. Braden cursed, slamming the club head into the grass. "It is the wind," he shouted, blaming the air. "It is this cheap glove giving me blisters. And Pops, you handed me the club wrong. You messed up my rhythm." I took the club back, silently wiping the grass off the head with a towel. "Actually, Braden," I thought to myself, "it is not the wind. It is your torque. You are dropping your left shoulder and opening the club, face 5 degrees upon impact. It is basic physics, but I suppose physics is too much to ask from a man who thinks stealing makes him a businessman." We played 9 holes. It was a procession of embarrassment. Braden played terribly, throwing tantrums at every hole, blaming me, blaming the grass, blaming the sun. He treated me like a servant, snapping his fingers, whistling at me to hurry up, throwing empty water bottles at my feet for me to pick up. By the time we reached the clubhouse for lunch, I was soaked in sweat and my back was screaming in protest, but my mind was sharp, cold, and observant. Braden led the group onto the terrace. The terrace overlooked the 18th hole, a sweeping vista of green hills and water hazards. It was crowded with the elite of the city: judges, senators, CEOs, people who quietly ran the world. Braden marched to a center table, pulling out a chair for Patricia and Vanessa Todd, and Rick sat down, ordering a round of expensive scotch. I stood by the edge of the table, holding the heavy bag. "Sit over there, Pops," Braden said, pointing to a low stone wall near the bushes. "Away from the dining area, you are sweating and you smell like, well, you smell like work. Do not embarrass me in front of the members. I will have the waiter bring you a water." I walked over to the wall and set the bag down. I sat on the stone, my legs throbbing. I watched them eat. I watched Braden order steaks and seafood towers, spending my money, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Patricia leaned over to Braden, whispering loudly enough for me to hear, "Look at him over there, sitting like a gargoyle. It is ruining the view, Braden. Can't we just send him to the car?" "He is fine, Mom," Braden said, loud and boisterous. "He is happy. He likes watching the squirrels. Just ignore him." I wasn't watching squirrels. I was watching a man walking across the terrace. He was an older man, tall with silver hair and a posture that commanded the room. He wore a navy blue blazer with the club crest on the pocket. As he walked, waiters stopped and bowed slightly. Members paused their conversations to nod respectfully. It was Arthur Sterling, the president of the club, the CEO of Sterling Maritime, and the owner of the Odyssey, a 200-foot super yacht that was currently floating in the Mediterranean thanks to the Bishop Hydro stabilizer system installed in its hull. I knew Arthur. We played chess online every Sunday under anonymous handles, but we had met in person many times at engineering conferences, usually in private rooms where Braden would never be invited. Arthur was walking straight toward Braden's table. Braden saw him coming. He straightened his tie. He kicked Todd under the table. "Heads up," Braden whispered frantically. "That is Arthur Sterling, the shipping magnate. If I can get a word with him, if I can pitch him on the land deal." "Oh, this is it, boys. This is the big leagues." Braden stood up, wiping his greasy mouth with a napkin. He put on his best salesman smile, a mixture of desperation and arrogance. He stepped out, ready to intercept Arthur, ready to shake his hand, ready to invade his space. "Mr. Sterling," Braden called out, extending his hand. "Good afternoon. Beautiful day for the links, isn't it? I am Braden Miller. I am in real estate, and Arthur Sterling didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He didn't even look at Braden. Hand. He looked right through him, as if Braden were made of glass, as if he were a minor annoyance, a gnat buzzing at a picnic. Braden's hand was left hanging in midair. He froze, his smile faltering. Arthur walked past the table. He walked past Patricia, who had poised herself to flirt. He walked past Vanessa. He walked straight to the stone wall near the bushes. He walked straight to me. I looked up. Arthur stopped 3 feet away. He looked at my sweaty clothes. He looked at the heavy golf bag sitting next to me. He looked at the family stuffing their faces at the table. His eyes narrowed, a flash of recognition, a flash of anger. He opened his mouth, ready to speak, ready to say, "Isaiah? What on earth are you doing carrying bags? Why didn't you tell me you were here?" I caught his eye. I gave a microscopic shake of my head. I put a single finger to my lips, pretending to scratch my nose, a signal silence. "Do not blow my cover. The trap is not yet sprung." Arthur paused. He was a smart man. He understood strategy. He saw the game. He closed his mouth. He composed his face into a mask of solemn respect. Then Arthur Sterling, the billionaire, the king of this club, did something that made the entire terrace go silent. He bowed. It wasn't a deep theatrical bow. It was a slight inclination of the head, a lowering of the eyes, a gesture of profound deference from one equal to another. It was the kind of nod a general gives to another general across a battlefield. He held the bow for 2 seconds. Then he straightened up, gave me a small, almost imperceptible wink, and turned around, walking back toward the clubhouse without saying a word. I nodded back, keeping my face blank. At the table, Braden's jaw had dropped. He turned to look at Todd and Rick, his face flushed with a new kind of excitement, a delusional excitement. "Did you see that?" Braden gasped, gripping the back of his chair. "Did you see that?" "See what?" Todd asked, looking confused. "He walked right past you." "Man!" "No, you idiot," Braden hissed. He bowed. He looked right at us and bowed. He nodded at me. He recognized me. Rick frowned. I think he was looking at the wall. Braden, or maybe the bushes. He was looking at me, Braden insisted, his voice rising hysterical with ego. "He knows who I am. He knows I am a player. He probably heard about the art deal. He knows I have cash. Why else would Arthur Sterling bow? He respects the hustle." Patricia clapped her hands, giddy with the proximity to power. "Oh, Braden, that is amazing. He definitely nodded at our table. He probably wants to invest. You should send him a bottle of wine." I sat on the wall listening to them rewrite reality. They were so blinded by their own self-importance that they couldn't conceive of a world where the billionaire was bowing to the caddy. They couldn't imagine that the power in the room wasn't the loud man in the tight shirt, but the quiet old man wiping sweat from his brow. Braden sat back down, puffing his chest out, ordering another round of drinks. "We are in, boys," Braden declared, lighting a cigar he couldn't afford. "Next week, I am going to walk into his office and close the land deal. He already respects me. The door is open. I watched him smoke. I watched the smoke drift up into the blue sky. The door is open. Braden, I thought, but it is not the door to a boardroom. It is the door to a trapdoor. And you are standing right on the X." I reached into my pocket and touched the voice recorder, making sure it was still there. "Enjoy your cigar. Son-in-law, enjoy the view, because the fall from the top of your imaginary mountain is going to be a long one." I picked up the heavy bag and slung it over my shoulder. "Ready when you are, sir," I mumbled, shuffling toward the cart. Braden snapped his fingers. "Let us go, Pops. Try to keep up this time. I have a reputation to maintain." Now I followed him, staying 10 steps behind, watching the back of his neck, watching the target. I followed him just like a hunter follows a wounded animal, waiting for the moment to take the final shot. The front door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the windows in their frames. It was 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday, and the air in the hallway instantly became thick with tension. I was sitting in my usual spot in the living room, staring at a blank television screen, pretending to be lost in the fog of dementia. But my ears were sharp, tuned to the frequency of my family dysfunction. Braden marched into the room. First, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. Behind him trailed Vanessa, looking at the floor as always, and trailing further behind was Leo, my 10-year-old grandson, his small shoulders hunched up to his ears, clutching a backpack to his chest like a shield. I watched them through half-closed eyes. It was parent-teacher conference day. I knew this because I had seen the reminder on the refrigerator calendar before Braden tore it down, claiming it looked cluttered. I knew Leo was a straight-A student. I knew he had won the district science fair last month with a project on solar energy efficiency, a project I had secretly helped him with, sketching diagrams on napkins and slipping them under his door. But looking at Braden, face, you would think Leo had just been arrested for arson. Braden threw his car keys onto the table, narrowly missing my teacup. "Unbelievable," Braden shouted, pacing the length of the rug. "Simply unbelievable. Do you know what it feels like, Vanessa, to sit in that tiny chair and listen to a teacher tell me that my son is refusing to participate in physical education?" "It is not that he refuses, Braden," Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling. He prefers the library. Mrs. Gable said he is reading at a high school level." "I do not care about his reading level," Braden roared, spinning around to point a finger at Leo. "I care about his reputation. I care about my reputation. Do you know who was at the school today? Todd was there. Rick was there. Their sons are the captains of the junior football team. They are athletes. They are winners. And I have to sit there while the teacher tells me my son is spending recess analyzing earthworms." Leo shrank back against the wall, hugging his backpack tighter. "I like earthworms," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "They are important for the soil." Braden laughed, a cruel, harsh sound that had no humor in it. "Soil," Braden mocked. "Did you hear that, Vanessa? He likes soil. My son wants to be a gardener. Great, fantastic ambition." "Leo." Braden walked over to the boy looming over him, casting a shadow that swallowed Leo whole. You are soft. Leo, Braden spat the words out like poison. You are soft and you are weird. You spend all your time in your room tinkering with trash, reading books that do not matter. You need to toughen up. I signed you up for the football camp starting next week. Leo eyes went wide. No, Dad. Please, I hate football. I want to go to the robotics camp, the one at the community center. Robotics, Braden sneered. You want to play with dolls made of metal. No, you are going to football camp. You are going to learn how to hit and how to take a hit. You are going to stop being an embarrassment. Braden grabbed the backpack from Leo's arms. He unzipped it and dumped the contents onto the floor. Books spilled out, heavy textbooks on physics and astronomy. A small box of circuits fell out, scattering resistors and LEDs across the hardwood. Look at this junk, Braden said, kicking a book on thermodynamics. This is why you have no friends. This is why you are weak. He looked at me, sitting in the chair, silent and unmoving. You are just like him, Braden said, pointing at me. You are just like your grandfather. A weak, useless old man who spends his life staring at nothing. You want to end up like that, Leo, drooling on yourself while your family takes care of you. You want to be a burden. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. I clamped my teeth together so hard I thought they might crack. It was one thing to insult me. I could take it. I had skin as thick as armor plating. But to tell a 10-year-old boy that his intelligence was a weakness, to tell him that his curiosity was a disease that was a crime. Leo looked at me, tears streaming down his face. He looked at his grandfather, the man he thought was broken and empty. He looked for a savior, but I sat there blinking slowly, my mouth slightly open, playing the part. No, Leo whispered. I am not weak. Then stop acting like it, Braden shouted. Go to your room and leave this trash here. I am throwing it out. Leo turned and ran up the stairs, his sobs echoing in the stairwell. Braden kicked the circuit box, sending pieces flying under the sofa. Clean this up, Vanessa, Braden ordered, walking toward the kitchen, where the liquor cabinet was waiting. I need a drink. A stiff one. Vanessa knelt down, picking up the books, silently weeping. I watched her. I willed her to stand up, to march into the kitchen and tell him to stop, but she didn't. She just cleaned up the mess, erasing the evidence of her son. Passion. I waited. I waited until night fell. The house grew quiet, settled into the uneasy silence of a ceasefire. Braden had passed out in the master bedroom, the whiskey doing its job. Vanessa was asleep in the guest room. At 2 a.m, I sat up in my bed. The house was dark. I slipped out from under the covers. My joints were stiff, but my mind was awake. I walked out into the hallway, moving silently on the balls of my feet. I went to Leo. Door. It was closed. I could hear soft sniffling from inside. I opened the door an inch. Leo, I whispered. The sniffling stopped, Grandpa. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The room was illuminated only by the street lamp outside. Leo was sitting on his bed, hugging his knees, surrounded by the few books he had managed to save. I walked over to him. I did not shuffle. I did not tremble. I walked with the upright posture of a man who had led engineering teams through crisis. Put your shoes on. Leo, I said, my voice clear and low. Leo looked up at me, squinting in the dim light. Grandpa, you are talking. I am always talking, Leo, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Sometimes I just do it quietly. Now put your shoes on. We have work to do. Leo stared at me confused, but the authority in my voice moved him. He pulled on his sneakers. I took his hand. It was small and warm. We crept out of the room, down the stairs, past the living room, where the ghost of Braden, anger, still lingered. We went to the kitchen and out the side door into the garage. The garage was empty now. The beautiful planes were gone, sold to Kenji for safekeeping. The shelves were bare, but in the far corner behind a stack of old tires Braden had been too lazy to move. There was a loose panel in the drywall. I walked over to it and pried it open with my fingertips. Inside was a small red toolbox. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I pulled it out and set it on the concrete floor. I opened it, revealing precision screwdrivers, a soldering iron, and a multimeter. Leo stared at the tools, then at me. Grandpa, you are not sick, he whispered. I looked at my grandson. I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear that he was broken because he didn't fit his father mold. I am not sick. Leo, I said. I am undercover. Undercover. Like a spy. Something like that. I smiled. I am an engineer. Leo, just like you. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out a handful of the components Braden had kicked under the sofa. I had retrieved them while everyone was sleeping. Resistors, capacitors, a small servo motor. Your dad thinks this is trash, I said, holding up the motor. He thinks because it doesn't score touchdowns, it is useless. But do you know what this is? Leo wiped his eyes. It is a DC motor, 12 volts. That is right, I said. And do you know what it does? It converts electrical energy into mechanical energy. It creates movement. It creates power. I handed him the motor. Braden thinks power comes from shouting, I said. He thinks strength comes from pushing people down. But he is wrong. Leo, real power comes from understanding how the world works. Real strength comes from building things, not breaking them. Leo looked at the motor in his hand. His tears had stopped. But he said, I am weak, Leo whispered. He said I am like you. I placed my hand on his shoulder. He is right. I said you are like me, and that makes you dangerous. I pulled a small blueprint from the toolbox. It was a sketch of a robotic arm, simple but effective. Tonight we are going to fix the servo, I said, and then we are going to build a lifting mechanism. We are going to use leverage, physics, and math. And when we are done, you are going to lift that stack of tires with one finger. Leo's eyes went wide. Really? Really? We spent the next 3 hours in the cold garage, huddled over the small pool of light from my flashlight. It was the best night of my life. I taught him how to solder a connection without burning the board. I taught him about gear ratios and torque. I watched his hands. They were steady, they were deft. He had the touch, the engineer touch. He didn't force the screws. He felt the thread. He didn't guess, he measured. As we worked, I told him stories, not stories about the nursing home or the TV shows I pretended to watch. I told him about the time I had to fix a hydraulic leak on a trawler in the middle of a storm, with waves crashing over the deck. I told him about the silence of a clean room where we assembled satellite components. I told him about the beauty of a perfectly balanced equation. Leo listened, drinking in every word. He wasn't the weird kid in the library anymore. He was an apprentice. He was a bishop. Around 4 a.m, we finished. The mechanism was crude, made of scrap wood and the salvaged motor, but it worked. We hooked it up to a battery. Okay, Leo, I said, attach the hook to the tire. He did it. Now press the switch. Leo pressed the button. The motor whirred, a high-pitched whine. The gears engaged. The rope tightened, and slowly, effortlessly, the heavy rubber tire lifted off the concrete, rising into the air. Leo gasped. He looked at the tire, then at the small box in his hand. I did it, he whispered. Physics did it. I said physics doesn't care if you are strong or weak. It doesn't care if you play football. It only cares if you are right. And you, Leo, are right. I packed the tools back into the red box and hid it behind the wall panel. We have to go back now, I said. The sun is coming up. Leo looked at me, anxiety returning to his face. Do I have to tell them, he asked. Do I tell Dad you are smart? I knelt down so I was eye level with him. No, I said. This is our secret, Leo. This is our mission. If they know I am smart, they will take me away, they will take the money, and they will take you away from me. We have to pretend, just for a little while longer. Can you do that? Can you be a spy with me? Leo nodded, solemn and serious. I can do it, Grandpa. And remember, I said, gripping his shoulders, you are not weak. You are the smartest person in this house. And one day you are going to own this house. You are a bishop. And bishops do not break. We build. We snuck back into the house silently, avoiding the squeaky floorboard on the 3rd step. We went back to our rooms. I lay in my bed, listening to the birds start to sing. I was exhausted, my body aching from the cold concrete floor, but my heart was full. Braden thought he had broken the boy. He thought he had shamed him into submission. He didn't know that he had just driven the boy straight to me. He didn't know that in the darkness of the garage, I was building an army of two. And the next time Braden called Leo weak, I knew Leo wouldn't cry. He would just look at his father and see a broken machine that wasn't worth fixing. I closed my eyes, smiling. Lesson 1 complete. Tomorrow night we study aerodynamics. Space is a concept that engineers understand intimately. We calculate the volume of a fuel tank, the cubic footage of a cargo hold, and the precise dimensions required for a human being to exist comfortably in a capsule. But in my house, space had become a battlefield, and the most contested territory was the master bedroom. It was the room I had shared with my wife Sarah for 35 years. It faced the east, catching the morning sun just the way she liked it. The walls were still painted the soft sage green she had chosen a week before she passed. It was my sanctuary. It was where I kept her urn on the mantel. It was where I spoke to her every night before I closed my eyes, and Patricia wanted it. I heard them discussing the invasion. On Friday morning, I was sitting on the patio pretending to doze in the sun. My hat pulled low over my eyes. The window to the kitchen was open, just a crack. "This guest room is killing my back, Braden." Patricia's voice whined, carrying through the screen like a drill. "The mattress is lumpy and the closet is tiny. I have 4 suitcases. Braden. 4. I am living out of bags like a refugee." I kept my breathing steady, listening. I know Mom Braden soothed her. I know it is not ideal. It is not just not ideal. It is insulting. Patricia snapped. "Look at that master suite. It is massive. It has the ensuite bath with the jacuzzi tub. And who is using it? A senile old man who probably doesn't even wash himself properly. He is wasting the square footage, Braden. He belongs in a twin bed in a facility, not in the best room in the house." I felt a cold tightness in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the absolute revulsion of hearing a stranger lay claim to the bed where my children were conceived. "We are working. It, Mom," Braden said, his voice dropping lower, conspiring. "I called the place Dr. Thorne recommended Sunnyvale. It is state-subsidized, so it won't eat into the estate. They have a bed opening up on Monday." Sunnyvale, I knew Sunnyvale. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place where the hallways smelled of urine and industrial bleach, where the staff was overworked and underpaid, and where patients were sedated into compliance so they wouldn't wander. It wasn't a home. It was a waiting room for the morgue. "Monday." Patricia sounded delighted. "That is perfect. That gives us the weekend to move his junk out. I can have the painters come in on Tuesday. I want that sage green gone. Braden, it is so dated. I want cream or maybe a soft peach." She was repainting my memories before I was even out the door. "But there is a problem," Braden said. "He is difficult. You saw him with the planes. He gets agitated. If we try to move him, he might make a scene. The neighbors might call the cops again. And we cannot afford that scrutiny." "Not with the bank freeze," Patricia laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Leave that to me, darling. I have a prescription. I have some leftover Valium from my last procedure. And I have those strong sleeping pills the doctor gave me for my flight anxiety. We will just calm him down. A heavy dose with dinner tonight. He will sleep through the night and be groggy all weekend. By the time he wakes up properly, he will be in a room at Sunnyvale and it will be someone else's problem." I opened my eyes, staring at the wooden planks of the deck. Poison. They were planning to poison me, not to kill me perhaps, but to chemically restrain me, to steal my freedom. I did not move. I did not storm into the kitchen and scream. I sat there and watched a cardinal land on the bird feeder Sarah had hung years ago. The bird looked at me, tilting its bright red head. "They want the room. Sarah," I whispered to the wind, over my dead body. I knew tonight was important, for another reason. Patricia had been talking about it all week. Tomorrow, Saturday morning, she was scheduled for a facelift, a blepharoplasty and a neck lift at one of the most exclusive clinics in the city. She had paid a non-refundable deposit of $5,000 using money she had likely borrowed from Braden, who had stolen it from me. She had to be fasting by midnight. She could have a light liquid dinner, but nothing after that. A light liquid dinner. Soup. The trap was set. At 6 o'clock, the smell of tomato bisque filled the house. It was canned soup. I could tell by the metallic salinity in the air. Patricia was in the kitchen humming to herself. She never cooked. The fact that she was standing over the stove was evidence enough of her intent. I shuffled into the dining room, leaning heavily on my cane. Acting the part of the confused geriatric Braden was setting the table. He looked nervous. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sit down, Pops," Braden said, pulling out my chair. "Mom made dinner. Nice hot soup. Easy on your teeth." I sat down. My hands were trembling, mostly for show, but partly from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Patricia walked in carrying 2 bowls on a tray. One was a blue bowl. One was a white bowl. She placed the blue bowl in front of me. "Here you go, Isaiah," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Creamy tomato. I put a little extra cream in yours to help you gain some weight. You look so frail lately." She placed the white bowl at her own place setting. "I am just having a little myself," she announced, patting her stomach. "Gotta fit into that surgical gown tomorrow. Right? Big day, new face, new me." She sat down beaming. Braden sat across from us, nursing a beer. He wasn't eating. He was watching. I looked down at the blue bowl. The soup was thick red and steaming, but if you looked closely, if you had the eyes of a man who spent decades inspecting microscopic welds, you could see it. Tiny white specks floating on the surface of the cream swirl. Not salt, not pepper, undissolved powder. She had crushed the pills, but she hadn't dissolved them properly. Amateurs. I picked up my spoon. My hand shook violently. The spoon clattered against the side of the bowl, splashing a little red liquid onto the tablecloth. Patricia frowned. "Careful, Isaiah. Do not make a mess." I lifted the spoon halfway to my mouth, then stopped. I looked at the window. "Look," I said, pointing a shaking finger at the garden. "The dog, Barnaby. He is outside." Braden and Patricia both turned their heads instinctively, looking toward the dark glass of the sliding doors. "Barnaby is dead." "Pops," Braden sighed, turning back. "You know that." But in that split second, that 2 seconds of distraction, my hands stopped shaking entirely. My left hand grabbed my blue bowl. My right hand grabbed Patricia's white bowl. The switch was smooth, silent, and precise. It was a maneuver I had practiced in my mind a dozen times. It was the sleight of hand of a magician. When they looked back, the bowls were reversed, but they looked identical. "Barnaby is cold," I mumbled, looking down at the white bowl now sitting in front of me. "Just eat your soup, Isaiah," Patricia snapped, losing her patience. "We have a big day tomorrow." I dipped my spoon into the white bowl, the clean soup. It tasted like salt and preservatives, but to me, it tasted like justice. I watched Patricia. She blew on her spoon delicately. She took a sip. She swallowed. She said. "It is actually not bad. Needs salt, though." She reached for the salt shaker, shaking it vigorously over the blue bowl, the bowl laced with enough sedatives to knock out a horse. She stirred it in, masking the bitterness of the drugs. I ate slowly, watching her consume her own trap. Spoonful by spoonful, she ingested the chemicals meant to imprison me. Braden watched me intently. He was waiting for my eyes to droop. He was waiting for me to slur my speech. "How is the soup, Pops?" Braden asked, leaning forward. "Good," I said. "Good." Red. 10 minutes passed. Patricia blinked. She rubbed her forehead. "Is it hot in here?" she asked, slurring slightly. Her words were starting to drag, running into each other like melting wax. "The thermostat is set to 70, Braden said, looking at her. "Mom, are you okay? I feel dizzy," Patricia mumbled. She dropped her spoon. It clattered into the empty bowl, splashing red droplets onto her silk blouse. "Maybe it is the fasting," Braden suggested. "You didn't eat lunch. You were just lightheaded." Patricia nodded her head, bobbing loosely heavily. "No. Sleepy. So sleepy." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes rolling up into her head. Her mouth fell open. "Mom." Braden stood up, concerned. I continued to eat my soup, scraping the bottom of the bowl. "She is tired," I said calmly. "She works hard, yelling all day." Patricia, head lolled to the side, she let out a snore, a loud, unladylike snort that echoed in the quiet room. Braden walked over and shook her shoulder. "Mom, wake up. You cannot sleep at the table." Patricia swatted at him blindly, her hand uncoordinated, mashing into his face. "Leave me alone," she muttered heavily, slurring unintelligibly. Go away. Braden sighed, relieving tension. It is just the stress. He looked at me, expecting to see me passing out too. Are you tired? Pops? He asked, hopeful. No, I said, sitting up straighter. I feel awake. I feel strong. The soup was energizing. Braden frowned, confused. He looked at the empty blue bowl in front of his mother, then at the empty white bowl in front of me. He didn't put it together. He couldn't conceive that the senile old man was capable of a tactical switch. Let us get her to bed, Braden grumbled, grabbing Patricia's arm. Help me! Vanessa! Vanessa came running from the living room. Together they dragged Patricia up the stairs, her feet dragged on the carpet, dead weight. She was out cold. I sat at the table alone. I listened to the sounds of them heaving her onto the lumpy mattress in the guest room. I looked at the clock. It was 7:30 p.m. The surgery was at 8 a.m. tomorrow, if the dosage was what I thought it was, a cocktail of Valium and sleeping pills. She wouldn't wake up for at least 14 hours. And when she did wake up, she would be groggy, confused, and vomiting. She was going to miss her appointment. And since it was a Saturday and the clinic had a strict 24-hour cancellation policy, she was going to lose her $5,000 deposit. The money Braden had stolen from me. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I washed my bowl, drying it carefully. I walked past the foot of the stairs. Braden was coming down, looking exhausted. She is out like a light, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Weird. She usually has insomnia. Maybe she has a guilty conscience, I said softly. Braden looked at me sharp. What did you say? I pointed to the ceiling. I said, maybe she has a heavy conscience, heavy sleep. Braden rolled his eyes, ignoring the wisdom hiding in plain sight. Just go to bed, old man. Tomorrow is a big day for you too, he smirked, thinking about Sunnyvale. I went to my room, the master bedroom. I locked the door. I lay down on the mattress that Patricia coveted. I looked at the ceiling. I listened to the house settle. Upstairs, Patricia was in a chemical coma of her own making. Downstairs, Braden was probably drinking, hoping I would be comatose by morning. But I was wide awake. I pulled the blankets up to my chin. You wanted the room, Patricia. I whispered into the dark, but you forgot the first rule of engineering. Never test a system you do not understand. Tomorrow morning the alarm would ring and she would not hear it. The clinic would call and she would not answer, and I would be sitting at the kitchen table eating my breakfast, listening to the silence of a victory bought with a bowl of soup. Sunnyvale would have to wait. And as for my bedroom, it was still occupied by the only person in this house who knew how to stay awake. Greed is a blinder that works more effectively than any horse blinder ever invented. It narrows the vision until the only thing a man can see is the number at the bottom of a page. Braden Miller was currently staring at a piece of paper with a level of intensity usually reserved for religious experiences. But what he was worshiping was not a god. It was a deed to 40 acres of scrubland in the middle of nowhere. It was Sunday afternoon and the house was quiet, mostly because Patricia was still upstairs recovering from her missed surgery. She had woken up groggy and furious. Yesterday afternoon, vomiting into a bucket and blaming a stomach flu for her misfortune. Braden, however, had recovered from his financial embarrassment at the golf club by rummaging through my filing cabinet again. This time, he had found the deed to Black Creek Ridge. He slapped the yellow document onto the coffee table right in front of my teacup, creating a small tsunami in the saucer. Look at this, Pops, Braden said, his voice trembling with excitement. Just look at it. I found this at the bottom of the box labeled Old Tax Records. You have been sitting on 40 acres of land for 30 years. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at the deed calmly, acting as if I barely recognized it. That, I mumbled, squinting. It is just the dirt. Braden, the dirt with the rocks. Nothing grows there. The corn died. The cows died. It is bad dirt. Braden laughed, shaking his head. Exactly. It is bad dirt. It is scrubland, rocks, and weeds. It is useless. It is a liability. You are paying property taxes on a wasteland. Isaiah. But guess what? I found a buyer. He leaned back in the sofa, spreading his arms wide like a savior. I made some calls this morning. My buddy Rick, the guy from the club, he knows a developer who is looking for a dumping site for clean fill dirt. Basically a place to bury rocks. They are willing to take it off your hands for $200,000. He let the number hang in the air, waiting for me to gasp, waiting for the poor old retiree to faint at the prospect of such wealth. $200,000, he repeated. Cash, deal fast, close. We can have the money by Friday. I stared at the deed. I did not see scrubland. I did not see a dumping site. I saw the Geological Survey report from 1998, hidden in a safety deposit box, that Braden would never find. I had bought that land for $5,000 because I liked the solitude, but a year later, while digging a well, I noticed the soil composition. I took samples back to the lab at the plant. The spectrometer results came back off the charts. The rocks that Braden called useless were rich in neodymium and dysprosium, rare earth elements, the essential ingredients for high-performance magnets, electric vehicle motors, and guidance systems. That 40 acres wasn't a wasteland, it was a mine, and based on current market prices, the mineral rights alone were worth conservatively $15 million. I was holding it for Leo. It was his trust fund. It was the key to his future, ensuring that no matter what happened, he would have the resources to build whatever world he wanted, and Braden wanted to sell it for $200,000 to a guy who wanted to dump trash on it. The ignorance was staggering, but I had to play the game. I had to let him believe he had found a gold nugget in a pile of coal, when in reality he was throwing away a diamond to pick up a penny. I do not know Braden, I stammered, acting fearful. My daddy gave me that land. He said never sell the land. He said land is the only thing that lasts. Braden groaned, rubbing his temples, frustration radiating off him. Pops, your daddy was a sharecropper. He didn't understand modern finance. This land is doing nothing. It is just sitting there. You are cash poor. You are struggling. This money could change everything. We could renovate the house. We could get you better care. He meant he could pay off his debts and lease another luxury car. I sipped my tea, letting my hand shake. But 200,000 is a lot of numbers, I said softly. What if the tax man comes? What if they take it all? They won't take it, Braden snapped. I will handle the taxes. I will handle everything. You just need to sign the transfer agreement. Rick is coming over tomorrow with the papers. I set my cup down. I looked at Braden. I looked at the greed sweating out of his pores, and I saw an opportunity to tighten the noose around his neck while securing a little walking around money for my next move. I leaned forward, whispering as if sharing a secret. Braden, I have a problem. What problem? Braden asked, impatient. The bad men, I whispered. Braden frowned. What bad men? The men from the bingo hall. I lied, creating a fiction on the spot. I owe them money, Braden. I played the cards. The big cards, and I lost. They said if I do not pay them, they will break my legs. Braden stared at me. You gamble. You owe money to bookies. I nodded, shamefaced. $20,000, I said. I need to pay them. Braden, if I sell the land, the tax man sees the check. But I need cash now. Before they come, Braden sat back, processing this. He didn't question it because he was a gambler himself. He understood the debt. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and calculation. $20,000, he muttered. You owe $20,000 to bingo sharks. Jesus. Isaiah, you are more trouble than you are worth. I cannot sign the paper if my fingers are broken. I whimpered. If you give me the $20,000, Braden, just to pay the bad men, I will sign the paper. I will give you the land. You keep the rest of the money, the big money. You keep it all. Just save my legs. Braden's eyes lit up. He did the math instantly. If he gave me $20,000, now he would get the $200,000 on Friday. That was a net profit of $180,000. It was a no-brainer, but there was a problem. Braden didn't have $20,000. His accounts were frozen. His credit was shot. He was broke. I watched the gears turn in his head. He bit his lip. He looked at his phone. I can do that, he said slowly. I can get you the cash, but you have to promise Pops. You sign the deed tomorrow. No backing out. No crying about your daddy. I promise, I said, clutching his hand with my cold, bony fingers. Just save me, Braden. Fine. Braden stood up abruptly. I have to go out. I have to. Make a withdrawal. Stay here. Do not answer the door. He grabbed his keys and ran out of the house. I walked to the window and watched him drive away in the rental Porsche. He wasn't going to a bank. Banks are closed on Sunday. He was going to a strip mall on the south side of town. He was going to visit a man named Sal, a loan shark who charged 10% interest a week and who broke kneecaps for a living. Braden was desperate. He was so blinded by the promise of the land deal that he was willing to borrow money from the devil to pay a debt that didn't exist. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I hummed a little tune. I was enjoying this, not the cruelty of it, but the symmetry. Braden was digging a hole, and every shovel of dirt he threw over his shoulder was landing right on top of him. 2 hours later, Braden returned. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had just stared into the abyss, and the abyss had asked for his social security number. He was carrying a brown paper bag. He marched into the living room and threw the bag onto my lap. "There," he said, his voice tight. "Count it." I opened the bag. Inside were stacks of used $20 bills. The money smelled of stale smoke and fear. It was exactly $20,000. I looked up at him. "You saved me," I whispered. Yeah, I saved you." Braden snapped, pacing the room, nervously wiping his hands on his pants. "Listen to me, Isaiah. That money, it cost me a lot to get it. You understand I need that signature tomorrow. If you flake on me, if you hesitate for 1 second, I will be in serious trouble. Do you understand?" I understood perfectly. He had borrowed $20,000 against a deal that was never going to happen. When Friday came, and there was no $200,000 check, Sal, the loan shark, would come collecting. And Braden would have nothing. "I understand, Braden," I said, tucking the bag of money into my robe pocket. "I will sign." "Good." Braden exhaled, collapsing onto the sofa. "Now get out of my sight. I need a drink." I walked to my room, feeling the weight of the cash against my hip. $20,000. It would go nicely into the new trust fund I was setting up for Leo. A little bonus from his father. I sat on my bed and looked at the deed. To Black Creek Ridge. Braden thought it was a piece of paper worth a quick buck. He didn't know it was a legacy. Tomorrow, Rick the developer would come with the transfer papers, and tomorrow I would sign them, but I wouldn't sign them as Isaiah Bishop, the owner. I would sign them as the trustee of the Leo Bishop Trust, a legal entity that required a board vote to sell any assets. The signature would be worthless. The sale would be void. But the $20,000 Braden had just handed me, that was real, and the debt he now owed to Sal. That was very real. I took the cash out of the bag and placed it in my new safe, the one hidden inside the hollowed-out casing of an old computer monitor. "Thank you, Braden," I whispered. "You wanted to sell the earth from under my feet, but you forgot to check what was buried beneath it." I closed the monitor. The senile old man now had a war chest, and the businessman had a target on his back. Monday was going to be an interesting day. The white waiter jacket smelled of mothballs and humiliation. It was a size too small tight across the shoulders, constricting my movement like a straitjacket. Braden had found it at a thrift store this afternoon, throwing it at me with a smirk that said, "Know your place, old man." Tonight was his big night. He had invited a dozen potential investors to the house, hoping to leverage the imaginary success of the land deal into a seed round for some vague tech startup he had invented in his head. He couldn't afford a catering staff because I had frozen the accounts and he had spent his loan shark money on the down payment for his reputation. So that left me. The homeowner, the patent holder, the engineer. I was the help. I stood in front of the mirror in the guest bathroom adjusting the black bow tie. My reflection looked back at me, weary but sharp. I saw my father in my face. I saw my grandfather, who had actually worked as a porter on the rail lines, earning dimes to feed a family of 8. He had worn a jacket just like this. He had smiled at men who called him boy, and he had swallowed his pride so that I could go to college and build spaceships. I smoothed the lapel with a trembling hand. Not because I was afraid, but because I was channeling the rage. The rage was a fuel. It burned clean and hot. Braden shouted from the living room, "Pops, get out here with the tray. People are arriving. Do not embarrass me." I picked up the silver tray, heavy with cheap crystal glasses filled with a sparkling wine that Braden claimed was champagne but was actually a $10 Prosecco. I walked out into the living room. The transformation was impressive in a superficial way. The lights were dimmed, jazz music was playing softly from the speakers, and Patricia was holding court on the sofa wearing a white silk dress that looked like it cost more than a car. It was undoubtedly a knockoff or stolen, but she wore it with the arrogance of royalty. The guests began to filter in. They were men in shiny suits and women with frozen faces, the B-list of the local business community, people who wanted to be rich more than they wanted to be smart. Braden was in his element, gliding through the room, shaking hands, laughing too, loudly pouring charm over them like syrup. I circulated through the room, a ghost in a white jacket. I offered drinks. I took empty glasses. I kept my head down, playing the part of the invisible servant. And just as I expected, they looked right through me. To them, I was part of the furniture, a prop designed to make Braden look like he came from old money. I approached a cluster of men standing near the fireplace. Braden was in the center, holding a glass of scotch, gesturing wildly. "The potential is limitless," Braden was saying. "The land deal is just the beginning, gentlemen. Once we liquidate that asset, I am pivoting to AI-driven real estate algorithms. We are going to disrupt the market." One of the men, a heavy-set guy with a red face, looked at me as I held out the tray. He didn't say thank you. He just took a glass without breaking eye contact with Braden. "Nice place you have here, Braden," the man said. "Must cost a fortune to maintain, especially with staff." He gestured vaguely at me with his drink. Braden laughed, a dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, him," Braden said, waving a hand in my direction. "Do not mind him. That is just Isaiah. He used to be the gardener for the previous owners. When we bought the place, he sort of, came with the property. I let him stay in the back room. Charity, you know?" The gardener. I froze for a microsecond. The tray in my hand didn't shake, but my soul did. I was the man who designed the structural integrity of this house. I was the man who paid the mortgage. I was the man whose name was on the deed locked in the safe. Braden couldn't crack, and he was reducing me to a charity case. A gardener. I felt the eyes of the investors on me, pitying, condescending eyes. "That is very noble of you." "Braden," the red-faced man said, keeping the old staff on. "Very noblesse oblige." "Yeah, well," Braden shrugged, sipping his scotch. "I have a soft spot for strays, and he is harmless mostly. Just a bit senile. Good for fetching drinks, though." I lowered my head, forcing myself to shuffle away, forcing myself not to smash the silver tray into Braden. Smiling face. I retreated to the kitchen, my sanctuary, setting the tray down with a clatter. "Harmless," I whispered to the empty room. "Just you wait, Braden, the gardener is about. Dinner is to do some pruning." The kitchen door creaked open. It wasn't a guest. It was Leo, my grandson. He was wearing his pajamas, looking small and frightened. He had been ordered to stay in his room. But hunger is a powerful motivator. Grandpa Leo whispered, "I am hungry. Dad didn't let me eat dinner. He said I had to study the football playbook." I looked at the boy. My heart broke all over again. Braden was starving him physically and emotionally, trying to force him into a mold he would never fit. I went to the pantry and pulled out a box of crackers and a jar of peanut butter. I spread it thick, handing him 2 crackers. "Eat this quick, Leo," I whispered. "Then go back upstairs. It is not safe down here. The wolves are feeding." Leo nodded, stuffing the cracker into his mouth, crumbs falling onto his pajamas. Just then, the kitchen door swung open again, wide and aggressive. It was Patricia. She stood there in her white silk dress, a glass of red wine in one hand, her face flushed with alcohol and malice. She saw Leo. She saw the crackers. "What are you doing down here?" she hissed, her voice slurring slightly. "You are supposed to be in your room. I was hungry," Grandma Leo stammered, stepping back. "Hungry," Patricia scoffed. "You are getting fat, Leo, just like your mother. You do not need food. You need discipline. Braden told you to stay upstairs. You are embarrassing us. What if a guest sees you looking like a ragamuffin?" She advanced on him, the wine glass tilting dangerously in her hand. She looked like a white witch, a specter of cruelty. "Go upstairs now," she commanded. I just want water," Leo said, backing into the counter. "Do not talk back to me, you little brat," Patricia shouted. Her veneer of sophistication cracked, revealing the trailer park bully underneath. She lunged forward, reaching for him. She wasn't going to hug him. She raised her hand, her palm open, fingers rigid. She was going to slap him. She was going to strike my grandson in my kitchen. Time slowed down. I saw the fear in Leo's eyes. I saw the malicious intent in Patricia's face. I saw Braden in the other room laughing with his investors, oblivious to the violence his mother was about to inflict. I was not the gardener. I was not the servant. I was the grandfather. I moved. I didn't move like an old man. I moved with the precision of a hydraulic piston. I stepped between Patricia and Leo, blocking her path. I held a fresh bottle of red wine in my hand, uncorked and breathing. Patricia's hand came down. It didn't hit Leo. It hit my shoulder. And in that moment, as her hand connected with me, I let gravity and physics do the rest. I stumbled, perfectly calculated. I threw my arms up as if losing my balance. The bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, a rich, dark vintage, flew from my hand. It did not fall to the floor. It arced through the air, a beautiful dark projectile, and emptied its contents directly onto Patricia. The wine hit her chest first, then splashed up onto her neck and face, soaking into the expensive white silk. Instantly, the stain bloomed like a gunshot wound, spreading fast, deep, and permanent crimson against the pristine white. Patricia screamed. It was a sound that shattered the jazz music, a shriek of pure vanity and horror. My dress, you stupid old animal." She stood there, wine dripping from her nose, ruining her makeup, turning her white dress into a wet red rag. She looked down at herself, then up at me, her eyes bulging with murder. I stood hunched over, acting terrified, my hands shaking. "Oh no," I wailed, my voice trembling. "Oh, the red water!" I tripped. "The floor is crooked. I am sorry." Mrs. Braden came running in, followed by 3 investors drawn by the scream. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, his mother dripping red wine, looking like she had just butchered a pig, his son cowering in the corner, and me, the senile gardener, apologizing to the floor. "Mom," Braden gasped. "What happened?" "He did it," Patricia screamed, pointing a wine-stained finger at me. "He threw it at me. He attacked me." I shrank back, covering my face with my hands. "She was going to hit the boy," I whimpered, peering through my fingers. "She was going to hit little Leo." I got scared. I tripped. Braden looked at Leo, who was trembling, clutching his cracker. "Is that true, Leo?" Braden asked, his voice tight. He wasn't concerned about the violence. He was concerned about the guests watching from the hallway. She raised her hand, Leo whispered. "She was mad about the crackers." Braden looked at the investors, who were murmuring among themselves. "Trying to hit the kid. A bit much, isn't it? Dysfunctional family." Braden had to spin this. He couldn't admit his mother was a child abuser. "It was an accident," Braden announced loudly, forcing a laugh. "An accident. The old man is clumsy. And Mom, you know how you get when you are startled. Go get cleaned up. Vanessa will help you." He grabbed Patricia's arm, propelling her toward the back stairs, away from the guests. "But my dress," Patricia wailed as she was dragged away. "It is ruined. It is silk. It is just wine." "Mom," Braden hissed, pushing her. "Go." He turned to me, his eyes cold, promising retribution later. "Clean this up," Braden ordered, pointing at the puddle of wine on the floor. "And get out of here. Go to your room. Stay there." I nodded, shuffling toward the pantry to get the mop. "I am sorry, Mr. Braden," I mumbled. "I am just a clumsy gardener." Braden turned back to his guests, flashing his winning smile. "Sorry about that, gentlemen. The help you know. Good intentions, but poor execution. Let us get back to the brandy. I have some Cuban cigars in the study." The guests followed him, but the energy had shifted. They had seen the cracks. They had seen the cruelty beneath the surface. I mopped up the wine. The red liquid swirled in the bucket, looking like blood. I looked at Leo, who was still standing by the counter. "Go upstairs, Leo," I whispered. "The show is over." Leo looked at me. He looked at the spot where his grandmother had stood. He didn't say anything, but he touched my arm just for a second. A silent, "Thank you." I watched him go. Then I finished cleaning the floor. I looked at the white jacket I was wearing. It had a few drops of wine on the sleeve, like medals of honor. Braden called me a gardener. He was right. I was weeding the garden. I was removing the invasive species that were choking the life out of my family. And tonight, I had just pruned a very large, very thorny branch. I took off the waiter jacket and hung it on the hook. The party was continuing in the other room, but the stain on Patricia's dress would never come out, and the stain on Braden's reputation was just beginning to set. I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the dark kitchen listening to them lie to each other. Tomorrow was the land deal. Tomorrow the gardener would become the executioner. Sunday night arrived with the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of a storm about to break, but inside my living room the mood was manic and delusional. It was the eve of the signing, the eve of the big sale. Braden and Patricia were celebrating a victory they had not yet won, drinking scotch that Braden had bought with the loan shark money and toasting to a future that was built on quicksand. They were loud, boisterous, and completely intoxicated by the prospect of the $200,000 they believed would be deposited into their hands by tomorrow afternoon. I sat in my corner chair, the invisible man as usual, listening to them spend my money. They were discussing renovations. Braden wanted to tear down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Patricia wanted to install a skylight in the master bedroom, the room she was still convinced she would occupy once I was shipped off to the state facility. Their greed was so naked, so unashamed, that it made my stomach turn. They were carving up the carcass of my life while I was still sitting there breathing. I could not watch it anymore. I stood up shakily, leaning heavily on my cane, and announced that I was going to bed. Braden raised his glass to me, mocking and cruel. Sleep tight. Pops. Dream of the countryside, because you are going to be seeing a lot of it soon. He laughed and Patricia joined him, a shrill sound that grated on my nerves like a rusted hinge. I shuffled down the hallway to my bedroom. The door clicked shut behind me, and the noise of their celebration muffled slightly. I walked over to the nightstand and picked up the framed photograph of my late wife, Sarah. She was smiling in the picture, wearing the pearl necklace that was now missing, likely pawned or sitting in Patricia's jewelry box. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I let myself weep. It was a performance, but it was grounded in a deep and painful reality. I was not crying because I was weak or confused. I was crying because I was mourning the daughter I had raised. Vanessa was out there in the living room, silent and complicit, watching her husband and mother-in-law destroy me. She was broken, and I knew that in order to save her, I had to let her break completely. I let the sobs rack my body, loud enough to be heard through the thin drywall. I wailed softly, a sound of pure despair, calling out for my wife, calling out for mercy. I wanted them to hear it. I wanted to test the last shred of humanity left in this house. 10 minutes passed. The door handle turned slowly. Vanessa slipped into the room. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked exhausted, worn down by the constant emotional battering of her marriage, Daddy, she whispered, closing the door softly behind her. Are you okay? I heard you crying. I looked up at her, clutching the photo of Sarah to my chest. My eyes were wet, and I made sure my hands were trembling violently. I am scared, Nessie, I whimpered, using the nickname I hadn't used since she was a child. I am scared of the bad men, Braden said. The bad men are coming for the house, he said. I have to go away. Vanessa's face crumbled. She walked over and sat on the bed beside me, putting a hesitant arm around my shoulders. She smelled of white wine and fear. No, Daddy, she said, her voice thick with tears. The bad men are not coming. Braden is fixing it. He is selling the old land, the rocky land. It is going to pay for everything. But I have to go, I sobbed. I have to go to the place with the white walls, Patricia said. So, she said, I take up too much room. Vanessa flinched. She knew exactly what Patricia had said. She had been there. We are trying to find a nice place. Daddy, she lied, her voice cracking. A place with doctors who can help you with your sugar. It is not because you take up room. It is because we want you to be safe. Liar, I thought. You are sending me away because I am an inconvenience, but I kept the act up. I looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. I want to stay here, I whispered. This is Sarah House. I want to stay with you. Nessie, do not let them take me. Vanessa buried her face in my shoulder and began to cry. It was a real cry, a release of all the pressure she had been holding inside. For a moment, just a moment, she was my daughter again. She was the girl who used to bring me lemonade when I was working on the car. She was the girl who had a conscience. I am sorry, Daddy, she sobbed. I am so sorry, I do not know what to do. He yells so much. If I say no, he gets so angry, then leave him. I wanted to say walk away, but I couldn't say it, not yet. She wasn't ready. She needed a push, a violent push. Suddenly the door banged. Open. Braden stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. He was holding his tumbler of scotch, and his face was twisted in a sneer. He looked at Vanessa, holding me. He looked at the tears, and his expression darkened from annoyance to rage. "What the hell is going on in here?" Braden barked, stepping into the room. "Why are you crying?" "Vanessa, we are celebrating, remember?" Vanessa pulled away from me, hastily wiping her eyes. She looked at him like a dog expecting to be kicked. I was just checking on him, Braden." He was upset. "He thinks we are throwing him out." "We are not throwing him out," Braden snapped, taking a swig of his drink. "We are relocating him to a facility that can handle his decline." "It is responsible, Vanessa. It is what adults do. Stop coddling him. This is why he is so soft." Vanessa stood up, her hands twisting together. "But Braden, maybe we do not have to do it right away. If we get the money tomorrow, maybe we can hire a nurse. He could stay in the guest room." Braden slammed his glass down on the dresser, making the wood jump. He marched over to Vanessa, invading her space, backing her up until her legs hit the side of the bed. "Are you crazy?" he hissed. "Are you actually suggesting we spend my money on a nurse for him? We are selling that land to save ourselves, Vanessa, to save us from bankruptcy, to get out of this hole. And you want to burn cash on a babysitter for a vegetable? He is my father," Vanessa said, her voice small but gaining a tiny spark of defiance. "He is not a vegetable, Braden. He is scared, and he is still in there somewhere. He is gone," Braden shouted, poking a finger into her chest. "He is a senile old man who forgets his own name. He almost killed you with the accounts last week, remember? He is a liability, and tomorrow when I sign those papers we are finally going to be free of him, free of the smell, free of the burden. Do not ruin this for me, Vanessa. Do not you dare ruin my payday with your daddy issues." Vanessa looked at him, and for the first time in years she pushed his hand away. "It is not just your payday, Braden," she said. "It is his land. It was his money." Braden's face went purple. The vein in his forehead bulged. The alcohol, the stress, and the sheer audacity of her defiance snapped something inside him. He didn't speak. He moved. He swung his hand in a wide, violent arc. Thwack! The sound was sickening. It was the sound of flesh, striking flesh, hard and unforgiving. Braden, open palm, connected with Vanessa, cheek with enough force to knock her sideways. She crumbled onto the bed, letting out a sharp cry of shock and pain. I sat frozen in the chair, clutching the photo frame. My knuckles turned white. I wanted to leap up. I wanted to drive my cane into his kneecap and shatter it. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until the light went out of his eyes. The soldier inside me, the protector, screamed for blood. But the engineer, the strategist, knew that violence now would ruin everything. If I attacked him, I would be the aggressor. I would be the crazy old man who assaulted his son-in-law. I would end up in jail or in the psych ward, and he would win. I forced myself to stay seated. I forced myself to whimper and cover my face like a coward. But under the blanket, my hand moved to the pocket of my robe. My fingers found the small, cold metal of the digital voice recorder. I had been carrying it for days, waiting for a moment like this. I pressed the record button. Braden stood over Vanessa, breathing heavily, his chest heaving. Vanessa was holding her cheek, sobbing quietly, curled into a ball on the quilt. "You made me do that," Braden hissed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You need to wake up, Vanessa. Wake up tomorrow. We are rich. We are going to be wealthy, and I am not going to let your weakness screw it up. Get up!" Vanessa didn't move. I said, "Get up!" Braden roared, grabbing her by the arm and yanking her to her feet, roughly. "Fix your face," Braden commanded. "Go to the bathroom. Wash your face and come back out to the living room. Mom is pouring champagne. You are going to drink it, and you are going to smile, and you are going to thank me for saving this family. Do you understand me?" Vanessa nodded mutely, tears streaming down her bruised face. I understand," she whispered. "Good," Braden said, smoothing his shirt, regaining his composure. "Now get out of here." He shoved her toward the door. She stumbled, then ran down the hallway, sobbing. Braden turned to look at me. He adjusted his cuffs, looking at me with pure contempt. "See what you made me do, old man," he said, cold and devoid of remorse. "You turn everyone against each other. Just go to sleep. Tomorrow, you are someone else's problem." He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I sat in the silence, listening to the heavy footsteps retreat. I waited 5 seconds. Then I pulled the recorder from under the blanket. I pressed the stop button. I looked at the small device. It was light plastic and metal, but it weighed more than gold. I had it. I had the sound of the slap. I had the verbal abuse. I had him admitting that he was doing it for the money. I had him coercing her. This wasn't just evidence of a bad marriage. This was leverage. This was the key to Vanessa freedom, if she ever chose to. Take it. And if she didn't choose to take it, I would use it to destroy him anyway. I stood up and walked to the mirror. My reflection was grim. I looked old and tired. The tears I had forced earlier were dry, but my eyes were burning with a dry, arid heat. I touched the glass, thinking of my daughter, face thinking of the bruise that would bloom there by morning. "You hit my child, Braden," I whispered to the empty room. "You struck a bishop." I opened the secret compartment in the back of the photo frame, the one holding Sarah's picture. I tucked the recorder inside, locking it away. "Tomorrow, you sign the papers," I said softly. "Tomorrow, you think you become a king. But tomorrow, Braden, the guillotine drops, and I am the one pulling the rope." I turned off the light and sat in the dark. I did not sleep. I sat vigil, guarding the evidence, guarding the rage, waiting for the sun to rise on the day of judgment. Monday morning arrived with the sterile chill of a corporate boardroom located on the 45th floor of a glass skyscraper in downtown Chicago. Braden Miller walked into the office of Sterling and Partners like he owned the building, his shoes clicking loudly on the marble floor. He was wearing his best suit, a navy blue number that was slightly too tight around the waist, and he was sweating a kind of nervous grease that no amount of cologne could mask. Vanessa walked a step behind him, wearing large, dark sunglasses to hide the purple bruise blooming on her cheekbone from the night before. I shuffled behind them both, leaning on my cane, playing the role of the confused passenger along for the ride. We were here to close the deal, the sale of the 40 acres of scrubland at Black Creek Ridge. The buyer was listed on the manifest simply as BI Holdings, a corporate entity that Braden assumed was a shell company for the landfill developers. In reality, BI Holdings stood for Bishop Industries, my company, the aerospace engineering firm I had built from the ground up and retired from 10 years ago. But Braden didn't know that. He didn't know anything beyond the number 200,000. We were ushered into a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and intimidation. Sitting at the head of the long mahogany table was Elijah. He wasn't wearing his usual tracksuit today. He was wearing a 3-piece charcoal suit that cost more than Braden rental Porsche. He looked formidable. He looked like the shark he was. Braden stopped when he saw Elijah. He didn't recognize him from the kitchen where Elijah had helped me up off the floor a week ago. Back then, Elijah had been in a baseball cap and shadows. Here under the fluorescent lights, he was Mr. Sterling, the senior partner. "Please sit down," Elijah said, his voice smooth and cold as liquid nitrogen. "We have a tight schedule." Braden pulled out a chair for himself, ignoring Vanessa and me. He sat down, puffing out his chest, trying to look like a player. "Good morning," Braden said, putting on his salesman grin. "We are ready to execute. I have the seller right here." He jerked a thumb at me. I sat down slowly, my joints popping in the silence. I looked at the table. There were stacks of documents, pristine white paper waiting for ink. Elijah nodded, pushing a folder toward Braden. "These are the transfer documents, Mr. Miller. As agreed, a cash purchase of the property located at Black Creek Ridge. Purchase price $200,000. The funds are in escrow and will be released upon successful execution of the deed transfer." Braden's eyes lit up when he heard the words "released upon execution." He reached for the pen, his hand shaking slightly with greed. "Let us get this done," Braden said. "Give me the papers." Elijah held up a hand. "Not so fast, Mr. Miller. There are addendums. Standard corporate procedure. Since the land is being purchased for industrial use, we need you to sign off on the environmental waivers and the mineral rights transfer." Braden waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, whatever. Environmental mineral rights, it is just rocks. Sign off on it. I do not care. I just want the check." Elijah opened the folder, revealing a dense document filled with single-spaced legal jargon. He flipped to page 10, pointing to a signature line. "This stipulates that the seller is aware of the soil composition and waives all future claims to any resources discovered thereon." Elijah explained. Watching Braden closely, Braden didn't even read the header. He didn't read the paragraph that detailed the geological survey, mentioning neodymium deposits. He just saw the line. "Sign here," Braden muttered to himself, signing his name quickly and aggressively. They're waved next. Elijah flipped the page. "This is the warranty of title. You are certifying that you have the legal authority to sell this land, and that there are no liens or encumbrances." Braden laughed nervously. "Of course I have authority. I have the power of attorney. Signed by Isaiah right here." He pulled the fraudulent document from his briefcase. The one I had signed with the name of my dead dog, Barnaby. He slapped it on the table. "See full authority," Braden declared. Elijah looked at the power of attorney. He looked at the signature that was clearly a scribble. He looked at me. I shrank back in my chair, chewing on my lip. "I do not like the high place," I mumbled, looking out the window. "It is too high." The birds hit the glass. Braden kicked my foot under the table. "Shut up, Pops. Just sit there." Elijah didn't say anything about the dog signature. He just nodded slowly. "Very well," Elijah said. "If you represent the seller, you may proceed. But we need Mr. Bishop's signature on the final deed transfer. It is a formality." Braden shoved the deed in front of me. "Sign it, Pops," Braden hissed. "Right there next to my name. Do it now and we go get ice cream." I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. I looked at Vanessa. She was staring at her lap, refusing to look at me, refusing to witness the theft of her father's legacy. I looked at Braden. I saw the desperation in his eyes, the loan shark. Sal was expecting his money back, plus interest, by Friday. If this deal didn't close, Braden was a dead man. Walking, I lowered the pen. I signed. But I didn't sign Barnaby this time. I signed my own name. Isaiah Bishop, clearly and legible. Naishiya wanted there to be no doubt about who was in the room. Braden snatched the paper away, blowing on the ink. "They're done. We are finished. Release the funds." He sat back. A triumphant smirk plastered on his face. He was already spending the money in his head, buying the house in Hawaii, buying the respect he could never earn. Elijah took the documents. He stacked them neatly, tapping the edges on the table to align them. He took his time. The silence stretched out, becoming uncomfortable. Braden tapped his fingers on the armrest. "So, the check." Elijah looked up over his reading glasses. He looked at Braden with an expression that wasn't businesslike anymore. It was pitying. "I am afraid I cannot release the funds, Mr. Miller," Elijah said softly. Braden's smile faltered. What do you mean?" "The papers are signed. The warranty is signed." "Give me the money." Elijah opened a separate file folder, one that had been sitting next to him the whole time. He pulled out a single sheet of blue paper. "There is a problem with the title," Elijah said. Braden stood up, knocking his chair back. "Problem? What problem?" "It is 40 acres of dirt. There is no problem. The old man has owned it for 30 years. I have the original deed." "You have a deed," Elijah corrected him. "But you do not have the current deed." Braden's face went red. "Listen to me, you suit. Do not try to squeeze me. I know my rights. We have a deal. If you are trying to lower the price, it is not about the price," Elijah said, his voice cutting through Braden's bluster like a knife. "It is about ownership. You see, Mr. Miller, when we ran the title search this morning, we found a discrepancy." "Discrepancy," Braden spat. "What discrepancy?" Elijah slid the blue paper across the table toward Braden. "Isaiah Bishop does not own Black Creek Ridge." Elijah said. Braden froze. He looked at me, then back at Elijah. "What are you talking about? Of course he owns it. He bought it in 1990. "He did," Elijah agreed. "But in 2010, Isaiah Bishop transferred the ownership of that land into an irrevocable trust." "A trust," Braden whispered, the color draining from his face. "Yes," Elijah said. "The Leo Bishop Educational Trust. To be specific, the land is held in trust for the benefit of his grandson Leo until the boy turns 25. The only person who can authorize a sale is the trustee." Braden grabbed the blue paper, reading it frantically. His eyes scanned the legal lines, searching for a loophole, searching for a way out. But who is the trustee?" Braden stammered. "If it is in a trust, who controls it? I have power of attorney over Isaiah." So I control the trust, right? Elijah shook his head slowly, allowing a small, cold smile to touch his lips. No, Mr. Miller. The power of attorney grants you control over Isaiah Bishop's personal assets. The trust is a separate legal entity, and according to the filing, the sole trustee with executive power over the land is Elijah paused, letting the moment hang in the air. Bishop Industries. Elijah finished. Braden dropped the paper. Bishop Industries. What is that? It is the buyer, Elijah said, pointing to the logo on the wall behind him. BI Holdings is a subsidiary of Bishop Industries. We are buying the land from ourselves, essentially. Or we would be if the sale were legal. But since you signed the warranty of title claiming you had the right to sell land that you do not actually own, you have just committed fraud. Braden looked around the room. Wild-eyed, he looked at the logo on the wall, a stylized B. He looked at me. Bishop Industries, he whispered. Bishop Isaiah. Bishop. The gears in his head were grinding, screaming as they tried to process the connection. He looked at the senile old man in the cheap suit, and for the first time he saw the coincidence was impossible. You? Braden pointed a shaking finger at me. You have the same name. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my cane. The fog in my eyes cleared just for a second, just enough for him to see the wolf staring back. It is a common name. Braden, I said, my voice low and steady. Lots of bishops in the phone book. But the company... Braden gasped, looking at Elijah. You work for him? I am the corporate counsel for Bishop Industries, Elijah said, dropping the pretense. I have represented Mr. Bishop for 40 years. And I can tell you, Mr. Miller, that Bishop Industries never authorized the sale of the Leo Bishop Trust assets. Braden sank back into his chair, his legs giving out. He looked at the signed documents, the evidence of his fraud laying out in plain sight. So, there is no money, Braden whispered. There is no $200,000, Elijah confirmed. There is no deal. The land remains in the trust for Leo, and you, Mr. Miller, have just signed a document warranting that you owned it, which means you have attempted to sell stolen property to a federal corporation. Braden put his head in his hands. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Sal, he moaned. Sal is gonna kill me. I sat there watching him crumble. I thought about the $20,000 sitting in my safe, the money he had borrowed from Sal to pay me off. He owed 20 grand to a shark, and he had 0 coming in. I looked at Vanessa. She had lowered her sunglasses. She was looking at the blue paper, looking at the name of the trust, the Leo Bishop Trust. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with shock. She realized that while she was letting her husband bully her son, I had been securing his future for a decade. Daddy, she whispered, you did this. I put a finger to my lips, shushing her gently. Braden looked up, his eyes bloodshot and crazy. You set me up, he screamed, slamming his fist on the table. You knew. You knew the land was in a trust. You let me borrow the money. You let me dig this hole. I didn't let you do anything, Braden, I said in my old man voice. I just sat here. You did the running. You did the signing. I just watched. Braden lunged across the table, grabbing my lapels. You old bastard, he shrieked. Give me the money. Give me the 20,000 back. I need it. I need to pay Sal. Elijah stood up, pressing a button on the intercom. Security, Elijah barked. We have a hostile situation in conference room B. Braden let go of me, backing away, breathing hard. This isn't over, he panted, adjusting his suit, trying to regain some shred of dignity. I will fight this. I will sue. I will prove you are incompetent. You can try, Elijah said calmly, gathering the papers. But I suggest you save your legal fees for your criminal defense, Mr. Miller, because once I file these documents, with the district attorney explaining how you tried to defraud a minor trust fund, you are going to need a very good lawyer. Get out, Elijah pointed to the door. Braden looked at me one last time, hatred burning in his eyes. Then he turned and ran out of the room, fleeing the scene of his crime. Vanessa stood up slowly. She looked at me. Go with him, Vanessa, I said softly. The show isn't over yet. She nodded, putting her sunglasses back on, hiding the truth. She walked out, leaving me alone with Elijah. Elijah sat back down and let out a long sigh. That went well, he said. I picked up the blue paper, the deed to the land that would make my grandson a millionaire one day. It went perfectly, I said. I stood up, feeling the strength in my legs. Now let us go home. Elijah, I have to be there when the loan shark calls. The silence in the conference room was brittle, sharp enough to cut skin. Braden stood near the door, his hand on the brass handle, but he could not leave. He was trapped not by the security guards waiting in the hallway, but by the colossal weight of his own ego. His brain simply refused to process the information Elijah had just laid out. He could not reconcile the image of the shuffling, drooling old man in the thrift store suit with the concept of a mastermind who controlled a multi-million-dollar trust fund. The cognitive dissonance was tearing him apart, and instead of accepting defeat, Braden chose to explode. He spun around, his face purple with a mixture of rage and terror. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his eyes bulging like a cornered rat. "He is a fraud," Braden screamed, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "He is a liar. Look at him. He is sitting there shaking like a leaf. This is a setup. You are all in on it. This lawyer is a crook, and that old man is a vegetable. He does not own a company. He does not own land. He barely owns his own bladder." Vanessa gasped from the corner, creating a small sound of horror, but Braden ignored her. He marched back toward the table, slamming, his hands down on the polished mahogany, leaning over to scream directly into my face. "Stop acting!" Braden roared. "Spit it out, old man. Tell them the truth. Tell them you do not know where you are. Tell them you think you are on a train to Georgia. You are senile. You are broken. You are nothing." I sat perfectly still, blinking slowly, letting a little bit of fear creep into my expression. I clutched my cane tighter, my knuckles white. It was the final test. I wanted to see how far he would go. I wanted to see if there was a single scrap of respect left in him. There was none. "He is playing you," Braden shouted at Elijah, turning to the lawyer with frantic eyes. "He is a con artist. He probably stole that deed years ago. He is manipulating the system. You need to arrest him. Not me. I am the victim here. I am the one trying to save his estate from ruin." Just then, the heavy double doors at the far end of the conference room swung open. They did not open quickly. They opened with a slow, deliberate weight. The sound of Braden's screaming died instantly, replaced by the rhythmic, confident click of expensive leather shoes on marble. A man walked in. He was a giant of a man, towering over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, encased in a bespoke Italian suit that shimmered under the lights. He was white with silver hair, styled to perfection, and a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. He radiated power, the kind of power that does not need to shout, the kind of power that moves markets with a whisper. This was Alexander Grant, the current CEO of Bishop Industries, the man I had handpicked to run the day-to-day operations of my company 10 years ago when I decided to retire to my garden. Alexander was a shark in the boardroom, but he was loyal to the bone. Braden froze. He looked at Alexander, and he saw exactly what he wanted to see. He saw a powerful white man, a man who looked like Braden wanted to look, a man who surely would understand the plight of dealing with difficult relatives. Braden straightened his jacket, wiping the sweat from his upper lip. He stepped forward, assuming this man was the real authority here to clean up the mess. "Sir Braden," said, his voice dripping with relief. "Thank God you are here. My name is Braden Miller. I am dealing with a massive situation here involving fraud and elder abuse. These people," he gestured at Elijah and me, "these people are trying to extort me. This lawyer is claiming that this senile old man owns a corporation. It is insanity. I need you to—" Alexander Grant did not stop walking. He did not look at Braden. He did not acknowledge Braden's existence any more than he would acknowledge a dust mite on his lapel. He walked straight through the space Braden was occupying, forcing Braden to stumble back to avoid a collision. Alexander walked past the empty chairs. He walked past Vanessa, who was pressing herself against the wall, trying to disappear. He walked straight to the head of the table. He stopped in front of me. The room went deathly silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Alexander Grant, the CEO of a billion-dollar aerospace firm, the man whose face was on the cover of Forbes magazine last month, slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket. He bowed. It was not a nod. It was a deep, formal bow of absolute deference. He held it for a long second. Then he straightened up and looked me in the eye. "Mr. Chairman," Alexander said, his voice deep and respectful, I apologize for the delay. I was concluding the acquisition meeting in Tokyo as per your instructions. Everything has proceeded exactly according to the plan you laid out. The hostile takeover has been neutralized. Braden let out a sound that was half squeak, half whimper. He looked at Alexander, then at me, then back at Alexander. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Chairman Braden whispered. The words felt like stones in his mouth. I looked at Alexander and gave him a small nod. Thank you, Alexander, I said softly. I assume the stock price held steady. It rose 2 points upon the news of your involvement, sir. Alexander replied, handing me a thin tablet showing a graph. We are stronger than ever. I took the tablet. My hand did not shake. I placed the tablet on the table. Then I did it. I let out a long breath, exhaling the persona of the weak, confused old man I had worn for weeks. I let the tension leave my shoulders. I uncurled my spine, which I had kept hunched for days. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up. I did not use the table for support. I did not wobble. I rose to my full height of 6'2", unfolding like a sleeping giant. The years seemed to melt away from my frame. The cloudiness I had forced into my eyes vanished, replaced by the sharp, piercing gaze of the engineer who had solved problems that baffled NASA. I looked down at the cane in my hand. Cheap aluminum cane. Braden had bought me from a drugstore. The prop of my alleged infirmity, I lifted it, feeling its lightness. Then, with a flick of my wrist, I tossed it aside. It clattered across the marble floor, sliding until it hit the wall with a loud metallic ring. Clang! The sound signaled the end of the masquerade. I turned my gaze to Braden. He was trembling violently now, backing away until his legs hit a chair and he collapsed into it. Not out of choice, but because his knees had turned to water. He looked at me, and for the first time he truly saw me. He saw the man who commanded respect from billionaires. He saw the man who had built a legacy from dirt and determination. Isaiah Braden gasped. You are standing, I am standing, Braden, I said. My voice was not the raspy whisper of the invalid. It was a baritone rumble, rich and resonant, filling the room with authority. I have been standing on my own 2 feet since 1968. The only reason I sat down was to see who would try to kick me while I was low. I walked around the table. My stride was long and purposeful. I stopped in front of Braden, looking down at him. He shrank back, trying to make himself small, trying to hide from the judgment in my eyes. You called me a fraud. I said, my voice calm but terrifyingly cold. You called me a vegetable. You stood in my house and told my daughter that I was a burden. You stole my money. You insulted my food. You threatened my freedom, and you hit my child. Braden shook his head, tears streaming down his face, panic taking over. No pops. I didn't mean it. It was the stress. I was trying to help you. I swear I didn't know. You didn't know, I repeated quietly. You didn't know because you never looked. You saw a black man with gray hair, and you decided he was nothing. You saw a quiet man, and you decided he was weak. You were so busy trying to look like a king that you didn't realize you were standing in the emperor court. I leaned down, placing my hands on the arms of his chair, trapping him. I am the chairman of Bishop Industries, I hissed. I own the patents that keep the U.S. Navy afloat. I own the building we are standing in. I own the land you tried to steal. And most importantly, Braden, I own the debt you used to try and destroy me. Braden sobbed openly. Now, a pathetic sound. Please, Isaiah, please do not ruin me. I will do anything. I will work it off. I will be better. I stood up straight, adjusting my cufflinks. It is too late for that, I said. I looked at Vanessa. She was standing by the window, her sunglasses in her hand, staring at me with awe and fear. She saw the father she remembered, the strong man, the hero. I looked back at Braden. You wanted to be a businessman, Braden. You wanted to make big decisions. Well, here is a business decision for you. I pointed to the door. Braden. Miller, you are fired. Fired, Braden blubbered. From the company. I do not work for the company. No, I said, my voice hard as steel. You are fired from the position of my son-in-law. Your contract is terminated for cause. The cause being gross incompetence, theft, and failure to meet the basic standards of humanity. I turned to Elijah. Elijah, give him the severance package. Elijah stepped forward, holding a manila envelope. He dropped it on Braden's lap. Inside that envelope is a divorce petition filed this morning citing irreconcilable differences and spousal abuse, Elijah said, and a restraining order barring you from coming within 500 feet of Vanessa Miller, Leo Bishop, or Isaiah Bishop. Effective immediately, Braden stared at the envelope. He looked at Vanessa. "Babe," he pleaded, "you cannot let him do this. We are a team." Vanessa stepped forward. She looked at the man on the floor, the man who had slapped her, the man who had called her son weak. She looked at me, the father who had risen from the dead to save her. She didn't speak. She just turned her head away, looking out the window at the city skyline. I gestured to the security guard standing by the door. "Get him out of my building," I said. 2 large guards moved in, grabbing Braden by the arms, hoisting him up like a sack of laundry. "Wait!" Braden screamed, kicking his legs. "No, I have rights. I have money. You have nothing," I said, cutting him off. "You are evicted from my house. You are divorced from my daughter, and you are erased from my will." The guards dragged him toward the door, his screams echoing down the hallway. "I am sorry. Pops, please." The doors swung shut, silencing his begging. The room fell quiet again. Alexander Grant smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Well handled, Mr. Chairman," Alexander said. "Did he sign the warranty?" "He did," I said, picking up the fraudulent document. "He signed his own confession." I looked at the empty chair where Braden had sat. I felt a deep, profound exhaustion, but underneath it was the clean, burning fire of justice. I turned to Vanessa. She was crying silently, tears running down her bruised cheek. I walked over to her and held out my arms. She ran to me, burying her face in my chest, sobbing like a child. I held her tight, feeling her shake, feeling the years of fear melting away. "I got you, Nessie," I whispered, stroking her hair. "I got you. The bad man is gone." She looked up at me, touching my face. "You are back, Daddy," she whispered. "You are really back." I smiled, kissing her forehead. "I never left baby," I said. "I was just working undercover." I looked at Alexander and Elijah, "Gentlemen," I said, straightening my tie. "I believe we have some work to do. I have a grandson to raise and a company to run, and I think I am going to need a new cane. This one," I looked at the cheap aluminum cane lying on the floor. "This one doesn't fit, Chairman." Alexander laughed. "I will have a titanium one commissioned immediately, sir." "Good," I said. I took Vanessa's hand. "Come on, Nessie. Let us go get Leo. We are going to get ice cream, and this time I am paying." The security guards had Braden by the elbows, ready to drag him out of the conference room like a bag of wet trash, but I raised my hand, giving a subtle signal to stop. They froze, holding him there, suspended between his past arrogance and his future misery. Braden was panting, his tie crooked, his face slick with the sweat of a man who realizes the walls are not just closing in, they are crushing him. "Wait," I said, my voice slicing through the room, calm and authoritative. "Do not take him yet. We are not finished with the accounting." Braden looked up, hope flickering in his eyes, a desperate, foolish hope that maybe I was going to show mercy, maybe I was going to write him a check and let him disappear. You want to make a deal?" "Pops," Braden gasped. "I can make a deal. I can work this off." I stood up slowly, leaning against the edge of the mahogany table, crossing my arms over my chest. "We are past deals, Braden," I said. "We are now in the phase of consequences. You see, you made a very common mistake. You assumed that because I was quiet, I was not keeping score. But I am an engineer, Braden. We always keep score. We measure everything, pressure, tolerance, and debt, and your debt has reached critical mass." I nodded to Elijah. "Read the ledger," I commanded. Elijah opened a thick black binder. The sound of the rings snapping open echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. "Item number 1. Elijah announced, his voice dry and clinical. "Outstanding debt to a Mr. Salvatore Romano, also known as Sal the Shark. Principal amount, $20,000. Interest accumulated, $5,000. Braden's face went white. He tried to lunge forward, but the guards held him back. "How do you know about Sal?" Braden shrieked. "That is private business." It was private business, I corrected him. "Until this morning." You see, Braden, when you borrow money from a man like Sal, you are betting on a future payday to cover it. But when I realized you were using my own money to try and pay him back, I decided to intervene. I called Mr. Romano. He is a businessman just like me. We speak the language of risk assessment. I offered to buy your debt note from him for 80 cents on the dollar. Braden jaw dropped. You bought the loan. I own the paper, Braden, I said, cold and hard. You do not owe the mob anymore. You owe me. And unlike Sal, I do not break kneecaps. I break lives legally. You owe me $25,000 payable immediately. And since you have no assets and no job, that debt is now a judgment against your future. I took a step closer, watching him squirm. But that is just money, I said softly. Money can be repaid. Crimes, however, cannot. Elijah flipped a page in the binder. Item number 2, Elijah read, forgery and insurance fraud, date of incident last Friday. Document in question, the general durable power of attorney with real estate provisions. Braden shook his head frantically. No, that was signed. He signed it. Vanessa witnessed it. It is legal. It is a forgery. I roared, my voice booming, filling the room. You coerced a man. You believed to be mentally incompetent into signing a legal document under false pretenses. You told me it was for a doctor. You told me it was for insurance, but it was a license to steal my home. And the best part, Braden, the signature on that document. I smiled a wolfish grin. I didn't sign it, Braden. I wrote the name of my dead dog. You were so blinded by greed you didn't even check. You tried to use a dead retriever to sell $1 million estate. That is fraud, pure and simple, and it is a felony. Vanessa let out a small sob, covering her mouth. She remembered the moment. She remembered the coercion she was witnessing, the legal autopsy of her marriage. But we are not done, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, because money and property are one thing, but cruelty. Braden. Cruelty requires a special kind of punishment. I pointed to the large screen on the wall behind me. Item number 3, elder abuse and deprivation of basic necessities. Alexander Grant, the CEO, pressed a button on the remote control. The screen flickered to life. It was a video, grainy but clear, taken from a micro camera hidden in the smoke detector of my kitchen. It showed the scene. From a week ago, the day they left for Hawaii. On the screen, Braden was standing in the kitchen laughing. He was pouring my insulin down the sink, vial after vial. The sound of the glass shattering was amplified, filling the boardroom. Oops, the Braden on the screen laughed. Looks like the old man is going to have to go on a diet. Then the video cut to another angle showing Braden writing the note. The sticky note that had started this war. Deal with this senile old man, he muttered as he stuck it to the fridge. Let him rot. The silence in the boardroom was absolute terrifying. The real Braden stood there watching himself commit a crime, watching himself sentence me to death by neglect. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at me, and for the first time I saw the realization sink in. He wasn't just a bad son-in-law. He was a monster. And I had the proof, that video, I said, pointing at the frozen image of his sneering face. That is attempted manslaughter. You left a diabetic man alone without medicine, without a phone, and you locked the door. You didn't go on vacation. Braden, you fled a crime scene. You hoped I would be dead when you got back. You hoped nature would do your dirty work for you. Braden's knees finally gave out. He sagged in the guard's grip, his expensive suit bunching up around his shoulders. I didn't mean it, he blubbered, tears streaming down his face. It was a joke, Pops. It was just a joke, I repeated, stepping into his personal space, staring down at him. A joke is when everyone laughs. Braden, I am not laughing, and neither is the district attorney. I nodded to the main doors. Open them, I ordered. The doors swung open and 4 police officers marched in, led by a detective in a cheap suit who looked like he had been waiting for this moment all morning. Braden Miller, the detective said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and attempted manslaughter. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it because you have talked enough. The guards released Braden, and the police grabbed him roughly, slamming him against the wall to cuff him. The click of the steel cuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. But Braden wasn't the only one. Where is my mother? Braden screamed as they spun him around. Where is she? You cannot do this to me alone. She told me to do it. The detective paused, looking at Braden with disgust. We picked up Patricia Miller in the lobby, the detective said. She was trying to charge a first-class ticket to Tahiti on a credit card that was flagged as stolen. She is in the cruiser downstairs, screeching about a ruined silk dress. She is being charged as an accomplice and for the theft of jewelry belonging to the estate. They had them both. The architect and the builder of my misery were both in chains. I watched as they dragged Braden toward the door. He was crying now, a messy, ugly sound, begging Vanessa to help him, begging Alexander to intervene, begging me. "Pops, please," Braden screamed. "I am family, I am family." I stood rigid, my face a mask of stone. "You are not family, Braden," I said, my voice cutting through his screams. "You are a parasite." And the host has finally taken the medicine. The doors closed behind him, cutting off his wailing. The room fell silent again. But the air felt lighter, cleaner. It was as if a heavy smog had been sucked out of the ventilation system. I turned to the table where the evidence binder lay open. I closed it gently. "It is done," Elijah said softly. I nodded. I looked at my hands. The hands that Braden had mocked. The hands he thought were useless. They were steady. They were strong. They were the hands of a man who had just dismantled a bomb without blowing up the building. I looked at Vanessa. She was standing by the window, trembling not from fear, but from the aftershock of the truth. She had seen the video. She had seen her husband pour my medicine down the drain. She finally understood that I wasn't the one who needed saving. I walked over to her. "He is gone." "Nessie," I said simply. She looked at me, her eyes wide and hollow. "He tried to kill you," she whispered. "He really tried to kill you." I took her hand. It was cold. "He tried," I said. "But he forgot one thing." What she asked. "He forgot that I built this family," I said. "And I know exactly how to take it apart when it breaks." I turned to Alexander Grant, who was watching with a look of solemn respect. "Mr. Chairman," Alexander said, "the board is waiting for your update." "Tell them the restructuring is complete," I said, taking a deep breath. "Tell them the toxic assets have been liquidated." I adjusted my tie, feeling the silk against my neck, feeling the reality of my position. I wasn't the senile old man in the kitchen anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was Isaiah Bishop. And I had just balanced the books. The heavy double doors clicked shut, sealing away the screams of the man who had dominated my daughter's life for the better part of a decade. The boardroom was quiet now. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady drone that sounded like the heartbeat of the building. The police were gone. The lawyers were gathering their papers. Alexander Grant gave me a respectful nod and silently led the staff out, leaving the three of us alone in the vast glass-walled room. Me, Leo, and Vanessa. I stood at the head of the table adjusting my cuffs, feeling the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly ebb away, leaving behind a deep, aching fatigue. Destroying an enemy is satisfying. It is a tactical victory. But breaking your own child even to save her is a tragedy. It leaves a scar on the soul that no amount of money can heal. Vanessa was standing by the window. She looked small. Without Braden's presence to shrink her, she should have looked bigger, but instead she looked like a building that had been imploded from the inside. Her structure was gone. Her foundation was gone. She was just a pile of rubble in a designer dress. She turned slowly to face me. Her makeup was streaked tears, cutting black rivers down her cheeks. The bruise on her face from Braden's hand stood out stark and purple, a badge of her compliance. She looked at me, then she looked at Leo, who was sitting quietly in a leather chair clutching his backpack. Then she did something that broke my heart. She didn't run to me. She didn't hug her son. She collapsed. Her legs simply gave way and she sank to the cold marble floor, falling to her knees. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. It wasn't the polite weeping of a woman trying to save face. It was the guttural, ugly crying of a human being who realizes they have wasted their life. "I am sorry," she choked out the words, wet and heavy. "I am so sorry, Daddy. I am sorry for everything. I am sorry I let him hurt you. I am sorry I signed the papers. I am sorry I was weak. Please forgive me." I looked at her. I saw the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to explain how airplanes flew. I saw the teenager who brought home stray cats. But I also saw the woman who had watched her husband pour my medicine down the drain and said nothing. I saw the woman who had let her son be bullied because she was too afraid to speak up. Forgiveness is easy, Vanessa, I said, my voice low and steady. It costs nothing to say I forgive you, but forgiveness does not fix the problem. Forgiveness does not rebuild the character you allowed him to dismantle. I walked over to where she was kneeling. I did not offer her a hand. I did not pull her up. I let her stay there on the floor because she needed to feel the hardness of the rock bottom she had hit. Look at me, Vanessa, I commanded. She lifted her tear-stained face, her eyes swollen and terrified. You are asking for forgiveness, I continued. But you are asking the wrong person. You shouldn't be apologizing to me. I am a grown man. I can take care of myself as I have just demonstrated. I am not your victim, Vanessa. I pointed to the leather chair in the corner. He is. Vanessa turned her head to look at Leo. The boy was watching us with wide, intelligent eyes. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked disappointed. And that look cut deeper than any anger could. You let that man call your son weak, I said, my voice hardening. You let him throw away his books. You let him shame him for his intelligence. You stood by and watched as he tried to crush the spirit of a boy who is smarter and braver than both of you combined. That is your crime, Vanessa. Not the money, not the house, but the fact that you chose your comfort over your son's dignity. Vanessa sobbed harder, reaching out a hand toward Leo, but pulling it back as if she felt unworthy to touch him. I know, she wailed. I know I failed him. I failed everyone. I don't know who I am anymore, Daddy. Without Braden, without the house, I am nothing. I have nowhere to go. She looked up at me, a flicker of the old dependency returning to her eyes. The look that said, "Fix it, Daddy. Write a check. Make the bad world go away. Can I come home?" she whispered. "Can we go back to the house? I will take care of you. I will cook. I will be better." I looked at her, and I knew that this was the most dangerous moment of the entire operation. If I said yes, if I took her back to the mansion and let her hide in her old room, she would never change. She would just trade one keeper for another. She would trade Braden for me, and she would remain a child forever. I reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. I pulled out a small white envelope. It wasn't the red envelope of doom I had given Braden. It was plain, simple, and light. I held it out to her. "Stand up, Vanessa," I said. She hesitated, then slowly pushed herself up to her feet, wiping her eyes. She reached for the envelope, her hand shaking. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it," I said. She tore the flap open. A single silver key fell into her palm. Behind it was a folded piece of paper with a Bishop Industries letterhead. She looked at the key, confused. Is this for the house?" "No," I said. "That is the key to a studio apartment on 4th Street. It is 300 square feet. It has a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a window that looks out on a brick wall. It is clean. It is safe. And the rent is paid for exactly 1 month." Vanessa stared at the key. "A studio? But—" I pointed to the paper. "Read the letter." She unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the text. "Offer of employment. Position, front desk receptionist. Salary, starting minimum wage." She looked up at me, shock replacing the grief. "A receptionist? But Daddy, I have a degree. I am the daughter of the chairman." "You have a degree you haven't used in 10 years, I countered. "And being the daughter of the chairman means nothing in this building. In this building you are an employee, and right now you are an unqualified one." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a tone of absolute seriousness. "I am not going to support a parasite, Vanessa. I am not going to fund a lifestyle for a woman who refuses to work for it. Braden turned you into a doll, pretty silent and useless. I am offering you the chance to become a human being again." I gestured to the key and the letter. "You have a choice. You can walk out that door and find another Braden. Find another man to pay your bills and tell you what to think. You are a beautiful woman. I am sure you can find a volunteer. Or you can take that key. You can go to that small apartment. You can put on a uniform. And you can come to work. But everyone will know," she whispered. "The people at the company, they know who I am. They will see me at the front desk. They will laugh." "Let them laugh," I said. "Let them talk. Respect is not something you get because of your last name, Vanessa. Respect is what you earn when you show up every day and do the job that is beneath you because you have a son to feed." I looked over at Leo. He had stood up now. He walked over to his mother. He didn't hug her. He just stood next to her, his small hand brushing against hers. "Mom," Leo said softly, "you can do it. You are smart. You helped me with my math homework, remember? Before Dad stopped you." Vanessa looked down at her son. She saw the faith in his eyes. Faith she didn't deserve, but faith he was giving her anyway. She gripped the key tightly in her hand. The metal bit into her palm, grounding her. "I don't have any clothes," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't have a car." "The apartment is on the bus line," I said. "And there is a thrift store around the corner. You have $500 in your pocket from the refund on the plane ticket. Make it work." I looked at my watch. It was a Patek Philippe, a symbol of my time and my precision. "You have a lot of work to do, Vanessa. You have to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to learn that $18,000 isn't just a number on a spreadsheet, it is a year of sweat and labor for most people. You have to learn that love isn't about expensive dinners, it is about showing up." I placed my hands on her shoulders. I felt her frailty, but I also felt a tiny spark of resistance. "I am not doing this to hurt you, Nessie," I said, using her nickname one last time. "I am doing this because I love you too much to let you remain a victim. I am breaking the cycle." I stepped back, creating a physical distance between us, a distance she would have to cross on her own. "You want to be Leo's mother?" I asked. "You want to be my daughter? Then prove it. Prove you are worthy of those titles." I pointed to the door. "Go to the apartment. Clean it. Prepare for tomorrow." Vanessa nodded slowly. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She took a deep breath. She looked at the key, then at the job offer. She folded the paper carefully and put it in her pocket. She turned to Leo. "I am going to fix this, Leo," she said. "It is going to be hard. We won't have the big house. We won't have the pool. But I am going to fix it." Leo smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen on his face in months. "I like small houses," he said. "Less places for monsters to hide." Vanessa choked back a sob, but she nodded. She turned to me. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. I kept the face of the chairman. "Don't thank me yet," I said sternly. "Thank me when you get your first paycheck." I turned and walked back to the head of the table, picking up my files. I didn't look back at her. I gave her the final instruction, the marching orders for her new life. "Start tomorrow, Vanessa. 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." I heard her heels clicking on the marble floor. The sound was different now. It wasn't the tentative shuffle of a victim. It was the steady rhythm of a woman walking toward a future she was going to build with her own hands. The door clicked shut. I stood alone in the silence. I let out a long breath, letting my shoulders slump just a fraction. I had destroyed a bad man today. But more importantly, I had just planted the seeds to grow a good woman. I looked at the empty chair where Leo had sat. "He is going to be all right," I said to the empty room. And as for Vanessa, time would tell. But for the first time in years, she was holding the keys to her own life, and that was worth more than any trust fund. The wind out here at Black Creek Ridge has a different voice than the wind in the city. In the city, the wind screams around corners and trapped between steel canyons, complaining about the obstruction. But out here on the 40 acres of land that my son-in-law tried to sell for pennies, the wind sings. It rushes over the tall grass and the rocky outcrops, whispering secrets about the earth below. Secrets about the $15 million of rare minerals sleeping just beneath our boots, waiting for the right time to wake up. It is a Saturday morning, 1 year to the day since the gavel fell, and the judge sentenced Braden Miller to 5 years in a minimum security facility for fraud and elder abuse. I check my watch. The Patek Philippe gleams in the sunlight, accurate to the microsecond. It is 10 in the morning. In the prison yard, Braden is currently enjoying his scheduled hour of recreation. He is likely walking in circles, looking at a fence, realizing that the only thing he successfully liquidated was his own future. But I am not thinking about Braden today. I am thinking about aerodynamics. T-1 minute, mission control. The voice is young, eager, and brimming with confidence. It belongs to Leo. He is 11 years old now, and he has grown 2 inches. He is standing 20 feet away from me, holding the launch controller for a model rocket that stands 4 feet tall on the launch pad. We built it together from scratch, no kits, no pre-made parts. We rolled the body tube from carbon fiber sheets. We machined the nozzle in the new workshop I built in the barn, and we named it the Vindicator. Leo is wearing a Bishop Industries baseball cap and safety goggles. He looks like a miniature engineer. He looks like the future systems check. I call out, my voice carrying easily in the open air. Fin stabilization, Leo shouts back, checking the fins at the base. Go, I reply. Ignition continuity, green light, Leo confirms. Parachute deployment charge, armed and ready. I smile, watching him. He is not the scared boy hiding in the garage anymore. He is not the boy who cried because his father called him weak. He is a pilot. He is a scientist. He is a young man who knows that his worth is not determined by how well he throws a football, but by how well he solves a problem. And standing behind him, watching with a look of pure pride, is Vanessa. She looks different. She is wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt. Her hair is tied back in a ponytail. She drove here in a used Honda Civic that she bought with her own money. She does not look like the porcelain doll Braden used to parade around parties. She looks tired. Sometimes, there are fine lines around her eyes that weren't there before, but they are the lines of a woman who smiles. For real, not for show. She is the office manager at the downtown branch now. She started at the front desk, answering phones, taking coffee orders, swallowing her pride every single day. She dealt with the whispers, she dealt with the rumors, and she worked harder than anyone else in the building. She was the first one in and the last one out. She earned her promotion, not because her last name is Bishop, but because she is good at her job. She catches my eye and gives me a thumbs up. She bought the rocket fuel with her own paycheck. She insisted on it. T-minus 10 seconds. Leo announces, his finger hovering over the red button. I step back, shielding my eyes against the bright blue sky. 987. I look at the ground beneath my feet. Braden called this a wasteland. He called it bad dirt. He was so busy looking for a quick payday that he missed the treasure right under his nose. He missed the minerals, yes, but he also missed the beauty of this place. He missed the peace, 654. I think about the journey that brought us here. I think about the insulin spilled on the kitchen floor. I think about the empty safe. I think about the moment I stood up in the boardroom and threw away my cane. It was a hard road, a road paved with betrayal and pain, but looking at my daughter standing strong and my grandson commanding a mission, I know I would walk it again. 3, 2, 1, ignition. Leo yells, pressing the button. There is a sharp hiss followed by a roar of white smoke. The Vindicator leaps off the pad, riding a pillar of fire into the heavens. It accelerates instantly, tearing a hole in the sky, going up, 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 leaving the earth behind. We watch it go, our heads tilted back, mouths open in wonder. It flies straight and true, a testament to our calculations, a testament to the laws of physics which never lie and never cheat. It reaches apogee, a tiny speck against the azure canvas of the atmosphere. Then pop, the parachute deploys, a bright orange silk canopy blooms, slowing the descent, bringing the vessel gently back to us. Leo cheers, jumping up and down, punching the air. Vanessa claps her hands, laughing, a sound that is free and light. I stand there, leaning against the fence, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. They tried to write me off. They tried to put me in a box. They tried to tell the world that Isaiah Bishop was a senile old man, a relic, a burden to be managed and discarded. They thought my silence was emptiness. They thought my patience was weakness, but they were wrong. I am not a relic. I am the foundation. I am not a burden. I am the fuel. I look up at the drifting rocket, catching the wind dancing on the currents. It is free. It is high above the mud and the noise. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean air of my own land. I am not just an old man. I am the engineer who fixed the broken engine of this family. I am the pilot who navigated us through the storm. I am the astronaut of my own life, and for the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Leo runs out into the field to recover the rocket. Vanessa runs after him, her laughter echoing off the hills. I stay where I am, smiling at the sky. C'est la vie, I whisper to the clouds, borrowing a phrase from an old friend. C'est la vie indeed, oral of the story. Dignity has no expiration date and wisdom does not fade with gray hair. In a world obsessed with youth and appearances, it is easy to dismiss the elderly as invisible or obsolete. But remember, the roots of an old tree run deeper than you can see, holding the earth together during the storm. When greed blinds you to the value of family, you don't just lose an inheritance, you lose your humanity. The greatest tragedy is not growing old, but growing cold. Treat your elders with the reverence they deserve for one day. If you are lucky, you will stand in their shoes and you will pray that your children are watching with love, not calculation. If this story inspired you to look a little deeper at the people around you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice, resilience, and the power of the human spirit. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been underestimated and how you proved them wrong. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that true strength is quiet, and remember, never mess with an engineer even if he is retired. See you in the next story.